was literally just about to start, and this stupid one of my systems just decided, hey, this would be a great time to boot up. I was like, why? like literally why? Why would you do that? It's such a strange system, and I don't know why it does it. It's been giving me some grief over the past little while, because it'll just like it's the system that I use for like media server, and it'll just sit there. It'll turn itself off when I don't play the media off it for like half a second. Like it'll just be like, nope, I'm off. It's like, excuse me, and then it'll just seemingly at random just turn itself back on, and it just happened. And it would only be the only real reason it's an issue is because it's in a server rack type chassis, and it's got some loud fans in it. Speaking of loud fans, I've been running my fans, and it is cold in this room, so it's a good thing that I'm streaming, because that is going to be my fingers are going to warm up pretty soon. I bet my phalanges. I never have enough blood flow, it seems. I don't know what it is. They say that's like a symptom of anxiety, is that the brain just doesn't prioritize sending blood to other places. So I don't know, but yeah. So welcome back to Draconian Discourse, of course. Today I'm taking a look at just some more, professional Twitter stream as per usual here. So we're just going to be taking a look at that. So just gonna real quick check my funny. So yeah, go ahead and send out the notification. Not like it's gonna do anything. Let's hop right in, shall we? So I don't exactly recall how. I suppose that we start from the very beginning, where there was I had to instantly, oh crap, I totally didn't even realize. Monitor, you have to show things. I had to immediately go and follow this account just because it's funny to see like the Goth Ultra MAGA Furry, and it's a lolbit profile picture, and it's got like a looks like a hand-drawn MAGA hat on it. And it's like emo, goth, MAGA, conservative, rape victim, survivor, anti-woke, furry Latino, very autistic, pro-life, Second Amendment, Gen Z, hashtag Trump 2024. Like it's just funny to see like all of the elements on there, where it's like it almost seems like a parody, but I don't even care, because it's like, I don't know, it's just funny. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is like a fair thing to say to somebody. You seem to look like a pedophile. Go rot in prison. And it's like, I'm glad that that's not the evidence for sex crimes. I'm glad that's not the evidence, the standard for conviction on that type of thing. It was just like, does he look like he could be a pedophile though? It's like, no, that's not a good standard. But yeah, I mean, don't harass people like this. But it's like, doesn't MAGA hate emos and furries? You've got no game and no response. What do you mean got no game? There's normally when you say you got no game, isn't that referring to like Gen Z uses the phrase Riz, so that's kind of funny. You've got no game, as in like you can't speak a good game. It like as in you can't spit a game. Is that a term that people use like for like debating? I don't know. That's an interesting way to say it. But it's like, yeah, you know. I don't know. There's just a weird. yeah, don't jump to that. I mean, that's ad hominem just inherently, unless someone's actually like falling into that category, then you don't just like lob out that accusation like that. Mostly they hate commies, child molesters, unproductive folk, and people who support political violence. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty good response to this initially. Just like, doesn't MAGA hate emos and furries? It's just like, no, we just don't like, commies because that's evil, child molesters because that's evil, unproductive folk because what are you doing? Get off your ass, go get a job, and people who support political violence because that's evil. Like, it's like that's pretty normal. And then the very well-adjusted response, you're part of a group that is fascist. It's like, okay, man. This is gonna be a big thing that that's a big recurring issue during this episode here is it's this completely idiotic idea concept that that being conservative is akin to being a fascist. Like, just stop. This is not the most ringing argument that I've had, but I'm sick of it, frankly. Oh, just because of this, I was gonna put on a MAGA hat, but I don't think I've got I don't think I've got that lined up. I totally forgot I was gonna do that. I forgot that. Dang it. That would have been funny. And not particularly for like the reason of wanting to associate with sort of the MAGA thing, but just as a middle finger, because it's like, oh, I'm so sick of you guys. This is such a weak argument. You're part of a group that is fascist, tried to overthrow the elected government. It's like, okay, so conservatism, republicanism, never been fascist before, not really fascist now. It's not really part of our purposes here. The Republican Party is simply a vehicle for conservatism. It's a tool for conservatism, and elected representatives are a tool for the ideology as well. And it's not done it's not lived up to its purpose, because who's driving the vehicle, right? Trump is driving the vehicle of the Republican Party, but that doesn't mean that he can't drive it poorly. Like, you can absolutely drive that vehicle poorly. So there should be absolutely like a sort of a back and forth about like, okay, who do we have driving the vehicle? Maybe we should have somebody else have a turn next, that type of a deal. But if every single person who says something like this is just been like groomed in an echo chamber online, and that's it. They've just been brainwashed, because like you don't even know what fascism is. Like, it's just the most ignorant thing possible. Ignorant thing imaginable, and it's the reason why they have Antifa cowards going out on the streets and committing political violence. Like, they associate fascism with people they disagree with. They don't want to actually engage with the people with which they disagree. They just want to punch them in the face, which is actually a pretty big tenet of fascism. Like, it's ridiculous. If you want to silence people, first of all, exact same concept of here, where if you want to silence people, it's not a ringing endorsement for your views. That's actually kind of an admission that you have lost the debate there. But yeah, it's just that bit is ridiculous. But of course it's going to come up again, because we can't have nice things on the internet. We're going to assume that every single person who disagrees with us is fascist, because the bloody Hitler meme, everyone I dislike is Hitler, a child's guide to internet debate or whatever. So there's that point. Tried to overthrow the elected government. So the group as a whole did not try to overthrow the elected government. There was a certain contingency of people who decided to try to take over a certain space for a certain amount of time, but like it's like saying that like a group of toddlers could take over the household of their parents. Like, do you seriously think that that could happen? What January 6th is, and that's obviously what he must be talking about here, because that's everybody's bugaboo on the left is January 6th. What that was there were loads of people who in sociology they call it sort of an eggshell skull, where as you turn up the heat on sort of the political debate, or sort of the culture, where, you know, people are kind of coming at each other's throats a lot more, and they're heating up their rhetoric, and they're, you know, not as well adjusted. I don't know, just when people get angrier at each other and they use more colorful language against each other, when we become more politically polarized, and that's sort of the vernacular that we exist in, is in this hot pot. You know, beyond a melting pot, it's a boiling pot. Like, when that's the scenario that we're in, there are some people who are pretty well adjusted, and they're not going to be the first ones to bubble out the top of the pot. But there are some people, and they call it the eggshell skull, where they're not so well adjusted, and if it's normal around them to be hearing like loads of people talk about like, we need to, you know, fascist, and saying all of this crap. This is the most important election of our democracy. This is what they're going to take everything from you. Like, when that is the normal for everybody, then normal people might look at that and be like, yeah, we can't allow this to happen. I'm going to go and vote. But then, you know, some other people, and as you ratchet it up, the amount of people who are most likely to actually enact violently due to the ideology increases every single time, because you just start gathering up more and more people with your rhetoric. To, you know, someone who's well adjusted is like, well, yeah, but I'm never going to like have a violent uprising or to try to promote some sort of a riot or whatever. But the more and more you play up to that, where you say absolute crap, like I think I was going to say rubbish, and I just fumbled that. But, you know, when you that's what you're communicating to people, where you're saying crap like violence, riots are the language of the unheard, then that's when you that's when you're ending up with a lot of people, when you are actively trying to justify acts of evil that are politically convenient to you, or just personally convenient to your entire confirmation bias. That is causing some massive issues. It leads people to riot even more often. And for what it's worth, you know, Trump has said a couple of things, like during what do you call it? During when you're campaigning and you go around and during rallies, Trump has said several things that like that people. You know, just like, oh yeah, if people punch him in the face, I'll you know, do their legal bills and whatnot. And you have to actually understand, in the context of a lot of his rallies, he's really like a stand-up comedian. He just reads the room, and there's just like millions of clips of him kind of doing this type of a thing. But when it comes to clips inherently of him like calling for violence, you know, I certainly say that his, you know, mentioning of that was very I mean, it's a bad idea, understanding that, you know, well-adjusted people are going to be like, oh, you know, he doesn't actually mean that, because but whatever. But and actually well-adjusted people will say, you probably shouldn't say that, because there are some other people out there who might actually take you seriously. So you have to make it very clear to people that is not something to actually be entertaining completely. Whereas Democrats, just constantly, and it's been happening for decades at this point, but especially within the past few years, Democrats love to ratchet up to violent language constantly, and it's only a problem when anybody on the right does it. It's the only time they're willing to grant that any sort of an eye, where, a critical eye, where it's like, well, he said this thing, what about this time, and it's like, do you even watch yourselves? Do you even look at your own party, where January 6th happened, and a big reason why the media gloms onto it is because the leadership was all there, and they're like, oh no, the suits and ties, we're getting attacked by these people and whatnot. It's like, okay, the only people who actually died were people who were engaging in the rioting and were engaging with riot police, Capitol Police. Overall, though, I don't want to get off into the weeds. Overall, the entire perspective with January 6th, really the correct conclusion to show there is that there were absolutely guilty people. Just because there's sort of the eggshell skulls doesn't mean that they're not guilty, and they should be prosecuted to the furthest extent of the law. But in the context of it, there were also some of those people who I absolutely believe were sort of groomed into that predicament, where, if somebody says, I'm going to go and I'm going to bust down those doors and I'm going to take over, and we're going to take over the entire country just by like invading the Capitol building for some reason. I don't know how they possibly thought that they were going to be able to do that. Because, when it comes to treason, I think an active element of the crime has to be that you actually pose a significant threat to the safety of the Union, and that just was never going to be possible. Even if there was a genuine takeover of the Capitol, that's not going to actually create a new government that all of the states are going to respect. What most likely happens is that most of the states band together and say, yeah, we don't actually respect that government. And the amount of people who try to take over that area are going to end up not prevailing, because the rest of law enforcement is going to be able to take care of them. There was absolutely no threat whatsoever, and the reason they knew there wasn't a threat was because Capitol Police, for example, were literally helping people into the building and literally guiding them in. And there's a massive difference between people trying to take over a building and violently trying to take over that building, and people who were literally guided in. And people who, I remember seeing sort of Tucker Carlson talk about how, like, oh, these people were actually really respectful and they revered the Capitol and all of this stuff. And it's like, well, but they're not well-adjusted people. The people who were there, a lot of them had ended up, had broken in and all of that. But, there's a big difference between coming in and shattering windows and, an officer, presumably somebody you can trust, coming by and saying, oh, right this way, sir. And generally, especially with sort of the eggshell skull type of people, they're really easy to just corral. I guess some people would call that being sheeple or whatever, which I suppose is kind of accurate in this case. But it's like, if you just say, right this way, sir, it's like, oh, okay, well, thanks for letting me around. Like, I don't know what they thought that they were doing, but, to say that January 6th was actually indicative of the entire Republican Party as a whole, the entire, like, sort of MAGA party it's not a party, but like the MAGA coalition as a whole, is just utterly ludicrous, because those people were a ton of people who were just kind of insane. One of the things I've said is, in the context of the Trump assassination attempt, that there's entirely a possibility that, the only possibility actually that the shooter was a Republican, and, a registered Republican who genuinely voted Republican and all of that, was if this shooter was one of the people, like, on Truth Social who had been talking about, like, Trump betrayed us and this, that, and the other thing. There's no real possibility of him actually being a principled conservative, because guess what? Principled conservatives don't murder people. And there's a difference between murder and killing. All murder is killing, but not all killing is murder. Sometimes it's justified in the terms of self-defense. You can't really be justified in self-defense if you climb up onto a roof and shoot somebody from hundreds of feet away and indiscriminately fire when you know that there are people behind your target, and you end up killing innocent people. Unless you're Destiny, then apparently it's not possible to be innocent and also support Trump, which is just absolutely ludicrous. And I don't understand how people can get pissed about talking about like sort of civil war when this is the situation that we're in. It's just like, well, the people who vote Republican, I don't care if they die, and I'm actually going to celebrate when they die because that's one less vote for Republicans. Like, we can't actually live in the same, under the same, social umbrella when that is the case, and you are going to see people become even more polarized if that is the situation that we're in. Regardless, so no, there was a contingency of people within MAGA that, did January 6th. Were they trying to overthrow the elected government? They might have thought that they were trying, but again, it's like a bunch of toddlers trying to take over, the smallest unit of government being a household. It's not going to happen. Like, Lord of the Flies, but with the adults there, is not Lord of the Flies. Like, they immediately just give me that. It's like that video of the dude who runs up to this Antifa thug, having like stolen an officer's gun out of a cop car, and he just walks up and he's just like, give me that, idiot. But especially when you consider that Trump himself had videos from the protest and when he spoke on January 6th, where he said, we are the party of peace. We're the party of peace. We don't do anything violent. Violence is not a thing that we do. We're the party of peace. We do things civilly and legally and within the law. We're the party of law and order. Like, he literally says, I mean, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he says it, he lays it on as thick as Trump loves to lay things on, because he loves to lay things on thick. But he says that in this case, literally the day of, and then they ban him from Twitter, because apparently saying we're the party of peace, we are not going to be violent, and then people supposedly doing violence in his name, and I'm absolutely willing to believe that there were feds among them, because, like, come on, with the amount of times that feds have groomed shooters, and the amount of times that they've tried to set up these stings, and like, I have no trust in any federal institutions anymore. I think it'd be better if we just abolished the vast majority of the alphabet soup under FDR. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, it's certainly not representative of the entire Republican Party, certainly not representative of conservatives, and you're really on thin ice if you try to attempt to pin January 6th 100% on Trump. Trump is only really guilty of speaking at a fourth grade level, and that fourth grade level attracts a lot of people who are not as well adjusted, not as well educated, not as really intelligent, frankly, because it's more accessible. Like I'm not saying that as sort of an elitist view. It's like, well, no, in many ways that's a good thing. In many ways that's the reason why he actually won in many of those swing states. But it's just because he's easy to understand. He's very easily digestible, and he's incredibly entertaining. But the issue with that is that when you pick up those sort of people, it's really easy for those people to take your words sort of out of the context. And I don't think we should be holding people accountable for the words that they speak when those words do not actually directly incite violence. I think the American people is pretty good at reading between the lines and understanding people's intentions. And they are guilty of, if there's someone above them who's actually inciting things, but that doesn't match the standard for incitement. And technically, even if he was there and he said, we're going to march on the Capitol and we're going to bust down the doors and we're going to do all of these things, technically speaking, that does not legally constitute for incitement. I think it should, but apparently that is not the way that the law is, and law scholars, constitutional scholars have spoken out on this. I trying to remember who I had heard from who had said that, but I can't really remember it off the top of my head. So that point is just really nonsense as well. Bans books. Since when has since when have Republicans or the right or conservatives been really pro book banning? I think certainly there's a certain understanding of, well, there are things that kids shouldn't be reading at a certain age level, but then once they reach a certain point, we're not actually burning books or banning books. Like, we're not book burners. That's a fascist thing, and fascists are kind of left-wing. Fascists are kind of authoritarian, and that's kind of not a very conservative libertarian view. It's not a very right-wing view. Crashed the #1 gay dating site during the Republican convention. What does that mean? Like, I don't even know what that is. That saying, like, oh, the Republican convention has a bunch of Republicans showing up in one particular area. What was it? It was in Michigan this time. Like, everybody was showing up to the Republican convention, and there were so many people in the convention that the #1 gay dating site, what is that, Grindr, like, that crashed because there were so many Republicans in one area. Like, yeah, believe it or not, gay people can be Republican as well. Like, believe it or not, you don't have to be straight to be Republican. Like, you just have to be a principled conservative generally. You just have to be on the right. Like, I don't understand what that sort of a point is. And it's like, you hate yourselves. It's like, no, not really. Like, we're perfectly fine with that. Like, it's just a strange thing to say, really, where it's like, you crashed the #1 gay dating site. It's just like, doesn't that mean that perhaps there's been a significant amount of Republican and gay crossover? Or does that mean that every single conservative is like a closeted gay or something like that? Like, who's the one being homophobic here? Because, like, obviously I understand sort of the argument is like, well, you just hate gay people, but you're actually secretly gay. It's like, yeah. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that, that conservatives can't live up 100%, 1,000% of the time to their own standards? Isn't that crazy that human beings are not perfect? Like, it's just really tiring, because it's just one rule for me, another for thee, at every single point with the left, really, that it doesn't matter. No principles actually matter at any point in any given time. The only thing that matters is the agenda. That really is what it seems like. And because I think there are certainly individuals who can fight confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance and whatnot, and actually come to a more nuanced position, but they're so few and far between on the left. It's just ridiculous. I've spoken with people who are right wing, and again, it's quite ironic that the moment that something goes free speech, it immediately becomes right wing, because it's almost saying that in order for left wing ideas to persist, they actually have to be enforced, because nobody in their right mind would believe in left-wing ideas unless they were crammed down on them, because left-wing ideas are bad. Like, we don't ban people based off of left-wing ideas. But we do have to ban people based off of right-wing ideas, because otherwise those ideas are going to persist. It's like, interesting. Funny that, isn't it? I wonder what the reply to that is. Fascist. If you think that Republicans are fascists, you are completely delusional about any notion of politique. Agreed. Try to overthrow the elected government. Degenerate bourgeoisie government should be overthrown. Yes. Oh, it's just sort of more of a general reference, and not specifically about that, but it's interesting. It's weird how you're clinging to such an outdated view of who they are. If you can, try meeting other people outside your purity circle. Yup. And it just goes to show that there's no standards. You know, it's just entirely a religious standard, 100%. Oh my gosh, LGBTQ2S. Nobody uses that actual label. Nobody uses that. Are you actually a Canadian and you voted for whoever the blackface prime minister is? Like our two-spirited community. Does anybody use that? Like, I don't think I've ever met a single Native American who uses that moniker. Like, I don't think anybody says it. And, you know, just Native Americans generally, but like, I'm pretty sure sort of the two-spirited, that entire moniker was specific to specific tribes and in a specific area. I don't know which specifics, but yeah, many furries and LGBT people are right-wing and MAGA. It's really a stereotype that you think all of us are left-wing. I'm a right-wing libertarian who's furry and bisexual, based. Many of my friends hold similar beliefs. Yeah, it's based. You know, it's almost like right-wing beliefs. Like everybody can actually coexist, whereas with left-wing beliefs, anybody who actually opposes the government, opposes whatever the aristocracy defines as right or wrong, must go. And if you think that sort of a theocratic worldview is the way that that conservatives think, then you haven't spoken to enough conservatives. And you know, people who sort of reject that general feeling, it's just like, hey, have you ever like spoken to a conservative? It's like, oh, of course not. It's just like, okay, yeah, but why then do you purport to know what they believe? You've never spoken with one before. You actually don't understand where they're coming from. How about you speak with some? And I can actually go out there and say, and I've said so online before, where it's just like, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised if you went and spoke with some conservatives. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised, and they're like, no, I wouldn't be. No, I wouldn't be. It's just like, really? Like, I have a feeling that you haven't actually tried. And you know, it's hard not to sort of fall into unfalsifiability there, but it's just, I don't know, because you know, you're talking to me right now, and I don't know if you can forever gaze into somebody and to discuss their beliefs and everything, and just assume right or left that they're just an asshole or something. I think if you gaze in hard enough, you can actually figure out why they believe what they believe, and say, well, you know, generally, I think people have the right goals, where it's like, we want the same things. It's just there's a disagreement on how to get there. Everybody has a different risk assessment, and you know, that's perfectly fine. I totally forgot to take my pill earlier. I only just realized that. How could I do that? Such a mistake. Gotta throw off my sleep. It's gonna ruin. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the long and short of it. And then here is where we get into some really fun territory. We as a community, and so he's talking about furries at this point. Maybe he's also talking about gay people. We as a community need to really ensure we prevent furries from falling into the conservative/fascist cult. If you have to put a slash here, and you are going to conflate the two, you understand absolutely nothing about conservatism, and you understand absolutely nothing about fascism. There is nothing that you know about these two things, because if you knew the first thing about either of those, you would understand that they were inherently just completely incompatible. Because fascism comes from I believe the Italian word fascisti, which means like literally their idea, their sort of founding philosophy is whatever they say in the Simpsons, that we form a mighty faggot. that's not at all what he sounds like. It's like Nelson or whatever the character's name is. I think it's that character. But regardless, the entire idea is that, you know, with many when you have one, you can snap the stick, but when you actually bundle them all together, they become strong. That inherently is a collectivist idea. That entire concept is collectivism. It's like, well, as one, I'm gonna snap, and as many, we can all team up and we can cram things down. I think inherently the idea behind it, and I think e pluribus unum is different. I think you can actually acknowledge that, well, yes, there's strength in numbers, but I think fascism is characterized at its core, the most basic philosophical beliefs. It's characterized by the idea that might makes right. So it's combining this sort of, you know, as one we fall, but when we're all together, we will, you know, we can't be defeated. Also with, because we can't be defeated, that makes us right. That makes us right fighters. And on an individual level, if you believe you're a right fighter, then you are going to pick battles with people all the time, and you're not going to be happy. Psychologically, sociologically speaking, this does not pan out very well for you when you are just like, I'm right about everything, and I'm not going to listen to anybody who disagrees, and all of that. In your interpersonal relationships, it's not productive. You know, someone who actually does that is going to get divorced, right? If you are trying to one-on-one, or you're going to end up having dramas in your friend groups of, you know, sort of breaking up, quote unquote, with your friends, and it's not going to pan out too well for you. But when you actually contrast that with conservatism is inherently an individualistic ideology. In you know, with fascism, it's like, you know, you can use it for a lot of different purposes, but it's characterized by a particular interest group, a particular in-group, really, that says, well, we need to band together as one to be able to become a strong weapon, to be able to bash other people into submission so that we can have our way. That is inherently like the opposite of conservatism, where especially when you sort of have a libertarian conservative view as sort of what the heart of the Republican Party is today, not the id, but the heart of the Republican Party today is all about, you know, we are individuals, and as individuals, you know, just inherently basing everything off of our government, you know, the history of this nation, that when this nation was founded, it was founded off of the idea that, you know, all men are created equal, and they were given rights, inalienable rights by God, and that government exists to secure those rights. That government does not give you the rights, it exists to secure them. They pre-exist, those rights pre-exist government, and the only reason for government to exist is to secure them. And if there is what government is it's inherently a collective of people who, you know, live generally in the same area, who say, we have one goal, and that is to protect the rights of our citizenry, and the only way to do that is by, you know, respecting where there is a limitation. Where do my rights end and yours begin? And when am I not really allowed to use my rights due to the fact that they are overlapping with your rights? And it's just sort of inherently life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When you use your rights to remove my rights or to tramp down on my rights, you are doing an act of evil. And if you do that as the government, then you have lost your reason for existence. You've actually perverted your reason for existence. And whereas on the left, the entire idea is, well, the founders had it wrong. This is what Many people, I believe, FDR and who's the actual like fascist. He's the one who ruined the presidency and turned it into a monarchical piece of garbage. What's his name? Woodrow Wilson. It's Woodrow Wilson who said that he tried to do this this rubbish by saying, I have founders had it wrong. We're at the point where we don't really need those principles anymore that actually, were here in the founding of our government. And luckily, when you have a president like that, we actually have a system of checks and balances, and it makes it really difficult for minorities to actually rule over majorities. Not even pluralities could rule over majorities, or like majorities over minorities. That there's a mitigatory system, excuse me, built into our government that is it's created for gridlock, that the government is going to protect these people, and to not, if any, interest wants to get into power, it actually, oh goodness sake, it's very difficult to be able to create like vast sweeping change just as one individual in government. So luckily people didn't what's the word, people like that president weren't able to really advance that agenda very well. He still ended up ruining a lot of things, and we're still feeling the consequences to a significant amount of those. FDR absolutely clapped so many things about government and about the Union, and we're still feeling the consequences of that every single time that we have the CIA do something redacted. But point here being, clearly fascism and conservatism are completely incompatible. If you actually understand what conservatism is, you'll realize, and if you actually understand what fascism is that you'll realize that conservatism is completely incompatible. And if you disagree with conservatism, you can still fall somewhere else, absolutely. But if you actually want to, ensure we prevent, I don't know if that means gatekeeping. I don't know if that means shaming. I don't know what exactly that means. But the more you go towards fighting against other people's rights to speech, to free speech, the more that you try to actually like force people to go along with what you want them to be like, the more that you actually seem like an authoritarian fascist. It really just doesn't compute to these people. So it's not like I'd be doing very much for somebody who's ignorant enough to think that conservatism and fascism are the same thing and that they're conflatable. And there's going to be more evidence that this person knows absolutely jack shit all about conservatism. But yeah, especially in the USA, they're not a large group in the fandom, but one is really too many to begin with. So you are genuinely saying that one conservative is too much to have in your community. How are we not actually going close to a civil war when you say, when you think that this type of stuff is acceptable, when you think that this type of stuff is the way to think? Like, you don't want conservatives to exist, and if they exist, you want them to exist far away from you. That is something that generally should be reserved for the nastiest ideologies, but it seems as though things have shifted so far to believe that what was once extremely a very vast contingency of American belief, that is no longer even acceptable within your own within your own community. Like, it's like, okay, next door neighbor, what do you think of them? You want to oust them from your community? You want to like remove them from their jobs? You want to bully them into submission? Like, how's this going to go for you? Genuinely, how is this going to go? Like what's going on with this? Because I want us to be able to actually live, and this is the point that I've been making many a time as of late, is that with the Civil War, it was the bloodiest war in really modern history, in the very least in America's history, and it was fought to end slavery. That war was the bloodiest war in American history, and they were physically separated from each other. How bloody is it going to be when you think that your neighbors are the enemy? How bloody is it going to get? That is a terrifying thought, that we are all being radicalized on this secret online world that only the person who's on that world actually engages with, and then you actually take that radicalization, you take it outside of that, and you behave in your life like this about normal people. Like just normal everyday people in your community. The social fabric is completely disintegrated. It's completely gone. And I don't know how we could possibly preserve this without there effectively being a split in the entirety of society. It's like, do we have to have every single state split in two, where, okay, we're going to put up a Berlin Wall, and half of this state is going to be socialist, and half of this state is going to actually be an American conservative ideal state? Like, is that what we're going to have to do at this point? Like, how can you possibly live next door to somebody who thinks that we can't tolerate, that one conservative is too many? Like, really? Because I speak with leftists all the time, and I'm perfectly accepting that in challenging and actually engaging in free speech and discussing all sorts of issues and all sorts of issues about the scope of government. Now I wouldn't trust them with a 10-foot pole if they were to run for government, because they would be absolutely disastrous to the liberties of that we enjoy in this great nation. But I don't think that they should die for thinking that. Like, I don't want them to be like ousted from the physical and social community entirely, because actually when you do that, you inherently are going to sideline people, and that is going to create a certain amount of people that eventually are going to come right back at you, and they're going to say, well, you a long time ago could have convinced me, and now I've grown up to be your worst enemy. It's like Incrediboy, where it's like, and I've thought this way about white supremacists, for example. If all of the white supremacists talk in the town square, and you like throw them out of town, and you burn down their homes, and then they have no place to go, what do you think is going to happen? Well, they're going to be like, well, we can't go back here because we've been persecuted out of this place. Do you think they're going to think, well, they must be right because they persecuted us, they must be right? That has never happened in all of history. Every single time a certain group of people are persecuted, they only want, and the scales at any level in human nature, on the small scale, on the individual scale, when your parents told you to do something and they were really harsh on you and really trying to get you to do that, what happened? You went the exact opposite direction, because we've all got a certain semblance of demand avoidance in us, and it may not be as pathological in others as it may be in some, but we've all got some demand avoidance. We don't like it when people tell us what to bloody do, and we want to have our personal liberties and freedoms, whether we believe they exist, whether we believe they pre-exist government or not. We inherently have a gut level of wanting to be left alone by people, because it's frankly biological. Nobody wants to be told what to do, especially not in a way that is vindictive and that is oppressive. So when you kick out all of the white supremacists, they go out and they're like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to find somewhere else to live, somewhere else to meet. They're gonna make their own town. They're gonna, they set up a barn or something like that, and then they're like, oh, I hear they meet in this barn, I'm gonna go burn down the barn. So they burn it down, and they're like, well, okay, now we need another meeting place. What's gonna happen? Eventually they're going to see you as complete enemies, and one day they're going to actually attempt to grow their population to the degree, and maybe there are people among your population that are like, I didn't have a dog in this fight, but I saw the way you treated those people, and if you have to censor them in order to keep your points alive, maybe they've got a point then. You actually legitimize people when you censor them in that way. It's really, really unsafe, and it's unsettling, because you take good people, and this is something I've said on the pod before, and I'll say it again. You take enough good people, and you sacrifice them, and you betray them, and you malign them, and you make enemies with every single one of them. There are going to be no good people left for you to actually align with. There's going to be nobody left who has your back. Nobody. And this is the fascinating thing, is that really we are totally for convincing people, because that's what we believe in, the power of free markets and the free market of the free exchange of information, of ideas, that there's a marketplace of ideas, that the right ideas are going to win, and that sort of invisible hand is going to prevail eventually. That the arc of justice the arc of history tends towards justice. And I also kind of tend to believe that the arc of history tends toward conservatism, tends toward capitalism, or whatever you want to actually, whatever term that doesn't actually rankle you, because apparently capitalism is just this evil thing. It's like, okay, then give me all your shit then. I make poverty level income. Like, give it to me. I deserve it. I need it more than you do. You make more money than me, so you should give it to me. That's not evil, because that's what you're saying. It doesn't scale well. It's never scaled well, and this stuff is just absolutely evil. Kind of all over the place, but this is somebody who thinks that one is too many. One conservative too many. One conservative is one conservative too many if they're in the furry fandom. And the way that I see it, hey, if you're conservative, doesn't really matter what you like to portray yourself as online, or if you want to go to these cons or whatever it is. It's like, hey, you're part of, you and I have more in common when it comes to shared values. And so we actually have a social social fabric that we can create between us. Nobody who shares a certain base amount of those inherent freedom, liberty-loving, American essential ideas can really be a part of that social fabric, and they refuse to be a part of that social fabric. And of course, Hassis Wolf saying something with an avalanche of coal, and this is referring to this. Oh wait, no, goodness sake, this Aberfan disaster that was in Wales, and it's like I don't know what that's all about, but not sure what that's in reference to entirely. Like, I don't know what the point is. I know what it's referencing, but I don't know what the point is. So we got a reply: far more than you think oppose you. I suppose there's sort of a missing predicate here in that. Sometimes it sounds weird when you say it out loud. When you read it, it's fine. Far more than you think oppose you. Far more than you think. Yeah, it is missing a predicate, but it's like far more people than you think oppose you, or far more furries than you think oppose you. Call us all the names you want. We will never accept your boot, and we are tired of holding our tongues for the sake of a peace, quote unquote, you never respected. And that's just complete facts right there. I want to see what conservative / fascist furries are up to. Why are you going to group them together, man? Why are you going to group them together? Once again, you don't understand shit about these ideologies. They're inherently incompatible, and you're stupid. Like, I don't believe in stupidity, but I absolutely believe in ignorance. This is just complete and utter ignorance, and obviously, from the subjective, what's the word? The subjective judgment. If you knew what I knew, you're stupid. But clearly you don't know what I know, and so you just bloody ignorant, and it's obnoxious. He's like, I want to see what they're up to. What do you think? Yeah, there's not many of you, haha. It's like, okay, like, is there any way to really prove that? Because this is a niche group of people, a niche demographic of people in furries, and it's a niche. A large amount of people within the demographic are going to believe in just sort of left-wing ideals, because the left is the political default, because it's childish, because it's entirely based off of emotions and subjectivity and these inherent childish standards, because it really hardly uses any amount of the prefrontal cortex whatsoever. It's all just I feel this way, therefore I am correct. So it's like, yeah, there's a reason why, and there's a lot of an overlap there, but there's a reason why people start out their lives liberal and end out their lives conservative. And on the horizon, I think we got something really interesting on the horizon, because Gen Z, my generation, is already the most conservative generation ever. And I think a big reason for that is because we have so much information in front of us that we're finally breaking through the barrier of trying to keep all of these gates up on the free exchange of information, and we actually look at consequences of all the actions of the baby boomers destroying the country, and leftism and cultural Marxism destroying the country, or at least destroying the social fabric to a seemingly irreparable degree. It's just, what do you think is going to happen? Like, are people just going to go along with falsehoods their entire lives, or are they actually going to stand up to this? And obviously, like, there's no way that I could sort of frame this without discussing sort of face to face with someone who disagrees, how the perspective is flawed, but it really just does come down to ignorance. But it's like, given the slurs and mentions from decades ago, I don't even know what this is saying. The slurs in mentions, like people saying slurs, it's like believe it or not, people still think and use offensive words, and maybe you should actually grow a spine and not get offended whenever people say mean things to you over the internet. Like, maybe you should get over it. It's like, I'm generally a pretty sensitive person. Like, do I throw a tantrum every single time somebody says something that's like rude to me on the internet? Like, I generally enjoy having these conversations, and people can be pretty rude, but it's like, hey, as the amygdala has not been the deciding force, and the prefrontal cortex is actually gotten more developed and far more powerful, I've gotten it's been a lot easier for me to actually not have to freak out at internet interactions with people. And I think actually the internet, sort of like you talk about, like the COD lobbies and whatnot, has actually strengthened my moral resolve in many ways, because now I actually don't have to worry about when people are rude, because and inherently that's sort of a competitive situation, and a sort of a ruthless situation is just representative of life. It's representative of reality. People are not going to be nice. People are going to be dicks to you. People are going to be rude, and it's going to hurt. But you have to actually learn to be able to live with that, because you can actually make a good life for yourself when you decide it's my decision how I respond to things in life. It's my decision how I respond. I can, there's reacting, there's responding. Do I want to act, or do I want to be acted upon? Well, I want to be in control of me, and so I'm going to control my emotions, and so the mean words don't really bother me so much. I don't know why that's, for some reason, like why is this a compassionate thing to say to people? It's actually the exact opposite. Why is this a compassionate thing? It's like it's just the most evil and a terrible thing that people are saying mean words to me. Like, really is that really the worst you've ever been through? Like, if that's the worst you've ever been through, is people saying mean words, you've had a pretty excellent life. And if you're still crying about that, then you need to buck up and actually experience the real world for a change. So much of what leftism truly is just, I feel bad for people who aren't well off, or I feel bad for myself, or I feel jealous of people who are better off than me. And conservatism is, there's a right way to act, and you can, if you behave in the right way, and I don't mean like morally right, I mean scientifically correct. Like if you actually just take in information, use that information to assess, to make a risk assessment, conduct an experiment in responding to the information, and then get the results, and then reincorporate that back in, you'll actually be able to see, that there's all actually a cause and effect to the world, and that you can actually act well so that I can make a better life for myself. That's actually far more empowering and far less fascist than anything that the left has to offer. Where the left is just like, no, daddy government will take care of you, and the right is like, the government exists to protect our rights, and that's it. They're not here to give us free shit. If you want anything, then you should actually go and work for it and get it yourself. Why should anybody else be in charge of making you happy? You are in charge of making you happy. That's empowerment. So have fun in your cage of sensitivity here. But I'm not going to support you in your own delusions. Like, genuinely, it is a delusional thing to think that other people being mean to you is the entire reason, is reason for you to lose your mind. Like, that is a delusional process, and you could actually really, really do with some cognitive behavioral therapy. It would really help you mentally if you could do that. It's like, I don't know what holding of the tongue you're referring to. It's like, this is why it happens, is because you think your view is correct and that you're a right fighter, and so therefore you think that you have to cram your view down on others. And so when people speak out of line, and people say things you disagree with or say things that offend you, you think, I need to stop you from being able to say that. I need to stop you from disseminating this information. I need to stop that completely. I need to stomp on that with my boots, with my jack boots, with my, brown shirt Nazi boots. And then they go and they shut people down and use them as an example to other people of, hey, if you actually speak your mind on any of this thing, if you actually, call it like you see it, if you say what is true, then we are going to punish you with physical force or otherwise, institutional force, physical force, cultural force. We are going to beat you back every single time. It's like, or you could just like speak with me and we could have an exchange of information and the best ideas are going to win. Like, it's just completely indicative that your ideas are utter garbage and that they don't convince anybody, that you can't convince anybody, that you have to force that down on people, and you use people as examples, and you say, this is what we're going to do to you. We're going to hang you up. We're going to string you up, and this is what's going to happen. We're going to put you on the public square. We're going to put you in the boo box on Twitter. All of this is that's just the entire wheelhouse, the entire leftist, actual fascist playbook. And it's just ironic that, the reason why you don't hear conservative thinking is because we actually have to come out of the closet. It's so much easier to be gay because you get praised for it. To come out of the closet as being gay, you get praised for it. Whereas, coming out as a conservative, you get harassed for it, you get banned for it. You don't get to say what is on your mind. You don't get to call things like you see it. You don't get to actually just have an exchange of information with people. You don't have to actually. You don't get to be in the marketplace of free exchange of open ideas and debate. You don't get to participate in that because apparently for believing in cause to effect, apparently for believing in accountability, apparently for believing in inalienable human rights and liberties, apparently for all of those things, you must be punished. That's what he's talking to when he's talking about, we will never accept your boot. We're kind of sick of it. We're sick and tired of being told that we're not allowed to just have conservative beliefs. And those conservative beliefs are really reasonable. And if you don't think they're reasonable, you haven't spoken to enough conservatives. You haven't listened to enough conservatives. You are suffering from an extreme case of delusionality. It's really something. Decades ago, yeah, whatever, bud. You're gonna villainize everyone who thinks differently than you because someone entirely unrelated 20, 30 more years ago said something you didn't like. You don't even know what fascism even is, and that's exactly correct. We're gonna villainize and demonize everybody who just thinks differently because just some guy, however many decades ago, just said something you didn't like, and that's it. That's the entire perspective. And so let's dive in a little bit more when it comes to, this sort of conflation of conservatism and fascism, because I can promise you, it's indicative. It's pretty enlightening to know what this type of a person believes. So let's have a look at it. These are VR chat. The VR chat rendering engine is like so bloody awful, and I'm not saying that like. It's VR. It has to run on a VR headset, but I'm just kind of sick of like this reversion to like such utterly like there's not even like ambient occlusion. Well, no, there's no shadows. I think there is ambient occlusion. Oh, goodness sake, there's ambient occlusion, but there's no shadows, and I mean shadows are generally like a massive FPS dropper. But it is kind of interesting to see. I think this is indicative of your ambient occlusion, where it's like kind of just lazy shadows, lazy in a technical sense, like lazy meaning like low intense. It's not like it's less work for people, it's less work for the hardware, but that's utterly besides the point.
Do conservatives contribute anything to the furry fandom?
Good ideas, namely. Good ideology, yeah. The empowering, thoughts on how to behave. Protection of inherent rights and liberties. A great social fabric where everybody can come together and actually everyone can believe in free speech and all of that. Furries would not exist if not for. So much about life on every single level would not exist if not for conservative values, if not for right-wing American values. That you're going to be completely ignorant of that because you don't know anything about anything. And what was the clip of the "I'm not making them a knight," that comedian talking about like being a history buff when you're younger is just the gateway drug to becoming a conservative, because it turns out the more you learn about history, the more you actually understand about cause and effect, and the more it kind of moves the needle on you. There's a reason why they start out, every single generation starts out as pretty dang liberal, and then they morph into, more and more and more and more conservative as time goes on, is because conservatism is not exactly an ideology. Conservatism is more of a natural consequence of there being consequences of cause to effect. Conservatism was inevitable. It was an inevitability from the moment that if you believe in the Old Testament, from the moment that Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, or were rejected from the Garden of Eden, or if you're more of the scientific materialist type, it was what's the word? It was an inevitability from the moment that the ancient Homo sapiens or Homo erectus or whatever ancient humans left the Pan-African continent. Just a complete inevitability. Maybe an inevitability from the moment that the first hominid species picked up a stick and used it as technology. Like it was just a complete and utter inevitability that eventually we would discern these truths, and that through thousands of years of reverse engineering that we were going to find these truths and to hold these truths as self-evident. And the sooner you realize that it just didn't just spring up out of nowhere, or that they're not just these old people with their old ideas and these outdated ideas, like we should just do away with them. That has never done well for anybody. And go and look up some words by Ian Chesterton. He'll have a lot to say. He's sort of seen as the founder of American conservatism, or at least the brain, the what do you call it, the brain father of American conservatism. But you don't know anything about conservatism, so you wouldn't understand any of that, would you?
Do conservatives contribute anything to the furry fandom?
Plenty.
Genuinely, I'm asking, because I was thinking about what a conservative run convention would.
You're not asking, though. You're not asking genuinely, because the moment that anybody will say anything in response to you is, you're just going to reject it, because you are seeped into this confirmation bias. And the only moment, like, you might realize it on your deathbed, and hopefully as long as possible, because I want you to live as long as possible. All right. I want you to live as long a life and as happy and fulfilled a life as possible, regardless of our disagreements. I don't think you can genuinely say that of conservatives, but I give you that goodwill, because I think everybody deserves to be able to at least strive to have that type of a life, that high quality of life. But it might hit you on your deathbed in however many years, but you might actually realize one day that that reality was kind of just bashing you down the entire time, and you just never actually understood that there was a right and a wrong way to act. That there's a cause to effect relationship in the world, and that maybe I shouldn't have been so mad about people who had already realized that. When people are mad at conservatives, they're generally not, or at least at conservative thought, at conservative beliefs, they're not generally mad at the conservative. The conservative is just the what do you call it? The conduit for that. For the truth really to come through. What they're mad about is reality. They're disconnected from reality in the sense that they wish that reality was what it literally is not. And they hope beyond hope that things could be different, that you could just kind of snap your fingers and magically make things easy, and snap your fingers and magically make it so that there's no cause to effect relationship, that there's no trade-off with any behavior ever, that there's no choices that you make that actually matter. They wish they could just snap their fingers and make it so. But no matter how much you wish it to be so, it's never going to be so. And it's not really me. And I think that generally tends to be the challenge with conservatism, is that it comes off as insensitive. It comes off as you're not actually you don't even actually care about this, do you? And I understand why people feel that way, but it's not because of what they're saying necessarily. Because I absolutely, you can have a sort of a poor spokesman for conservatism, where they're trying to. I think Trump is probably one of the worst spokesmen for conservatism, because he actually doesn't really believe, and he doesn't know. He has great instincts, mind you, but he doesn't actually know all that much about conservatism, really, when it comes down to it. Because he wasn't a conservative for the vast majority of his life, and I still don't really think he is a conservative now. He's just useful to conservatism, and so that's why he's been allowed to run conservative, the vehicle of American conservatism in Republican, being the Republican Party for as long as he has. That's why he's been the Republican leader for as long as he has, is because he actually does listen to conservatives. He actually does take in that, and that's the direction that he goes. So he's been useful. He's been bad PR. He's been a bad spokesman. He's been a bad representative of conservatism, but he's been a useful tool. And wherever I was going with that. I don't know, I suppose I could just continue on.
Do better than a normal or progressive con. And
because conservatism inherently understands cause to effect, and they inherently know how to govern really well. That is why they are currently dominating politics, is because people have actually gotten sick of this stupid wishy-washy, like, but people's feelings, man. Like, no, there's consequences to your actions. When will you learn? Like, there's things that we can actually do about reality, and there are effective things that we can do to make change, and that does not include bitching about things. That does not include just wishing with all my heart that things become better. That is actually putting into effect actions and behaviors that will actually help, like actually doing something that is effective. So yeah, when it comes to running a business, when it comes to running a country, when it comes to rules in general, when it comes to just literally scale it up from the way you live your life, scale that up to the way, to the largest government or organizational body whatsoever. Conservatism does pretty dang well at actually figuring all of that out. Like, it's the reason why everything is good. It's the reason why businesses exist in the first place. And honestly, I find it really ironic a lot of the time. This is a bit of a tangent, but you actually look at the furry community, and either this fellow in particular created this, designed his character, either from his mind, or actually, mind to pen to paper or whatever, and drew it out, or he commissioned and said, these are the ideas, can you design me something for that? Okay, I like that design. Inherently they participate in capitalism constantly, and it's not because anybody's making them do it, it's because it is just objectively the best way to actually exchange in value. It's like, I don't understand why there's such a big hang up with this type of a thing. Why is there still a rejection of conservatism, and why is there still this rejection when it clearly works and that you clearly live it? It's just that you mentally don't like the idea that you've lost in the way that you actually live your life. And you're going to end up with the Hassans and the Bernie Sanderses of the world, who are just like, well, I have to participate in capitalism. I'm not even going to attempt a Hassan. All I would have to do is become incredibly whiny and a man-child and miserable. But, there's a lot that they have to contribute, and actually all of the stuff that we kind of do in day-to-day life, when you look at these furries, and it's funny, they'll be super left-wing, but they'll also say, I know how much my labor is worth. It's like, that's inherently the basis of capitalism. And it's funny, like my initial introductions to communism and communist Marxist thought was from the initial premise of, in capitalism you don't own your own labor, but in communism you do own your own labor. And it's funny because it's actually flipped. Because owning your own labor means, well, I know what I'm worth, and I can choose whether or not I want to engage in exchanging my labor, my time, my value with something that you can exchange a value to me, and we both profit from it. It's something that these entrepreneurs on Twitter in the furry world do constantly. And it's something that it's the reason why these cons exist. It's the reason why management exists at these cons. It's the reason why businesses can actually profit from this type of activity, and that everybody actually enjoys going and doing it. It's like, so you genuinely are asking, you say, what do conservatives have to contribute to cons, for example, when it comes to the furry community? And it's like, how about the entirety of capitalism? Have you ever tried to do a Marxist con? Well, you can't sell tickets. You can't you can't have artists show up and peddle their stuff, because that's a free market and that's capitalism. That's not good. You can't have free speech, because free speech might actually run counter to the cultural hegemony, because we actually have to have control over all of that. So you can't allow anybody to speak their mind. So you're not going to have any creators. You're not going to have any anything really in and of itself. You're not going to be able to make money from it, so you're not going to actually be able to be self-sustaining. You're not going to be able to create additional value with that. You're just going to run it into the ground. I think a much more relevant and interesting question would be, what exactly do leftists have to offer when it comes to a furry convention? Because I think a lot of these people have lost the plot, frankly, where it's like, well, are you just a Democrat? Are you just a liberal? what do you actually believe in? Do you inherently not believe in free markets? Do you inherently believe in communism over capitalism? Do you like what exactly is it? Where do you get off with this? Because you seem to just use these labels and just throw them around and not know what any of it means. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I honestly couldn't think of anything substantial because
and he's about to say something that's really indicative of a very ignorant worldview, but I honestly couldn't think of anything. I wonder why. I wonder why you couldn't think of anything. Maybe it's because you don't understand what conservatism actually is, and you're about to prove it.
Than a normal or progressive con. And I honestly...
Not normal or progressive con. Progressivism is a stain. Like, the entire idea of progressivism is that the government doesn't exist to protect rights, and that we just have to take control of our own lives. It's that the government exists to do big things and to do great things and to have big ideas and push those big ideas and force those big ideas down the throats of the American people, and we can sacrifice all of those rights and liberties for the big message, the big picture, and the agenda and all of that. It's just like, no, it's not remotely true, but true of. Like, go ahead and try to have an FDR progressive con where you have a labor theory of economic value where, just working, you can just pay some people to dig some holes instead of actually providing some security or something of value at the con, and then see how the free market may exist, because progressivism is not communism, but it really is a slippery slope to it, because or authoritarianism, or just big government. You're not gonna see a lot of freedoms or really beneficial things at all going on when we're gonna have a progressive con. It's just like, okay. We'll see what you have to say about
better
that.
Than a normal or progressive con. And I honestly couldn't.
I like how normal and progressive, like, he has normal/progressive, and that's one side of his dichotomy, and on the other side is conservative/fascist. It's like, oh, okay, that's a really interesting little Freudian slip there, buddy.
Think of anything substantial, because conservatives are just conserving the status quo, or
that is not what conservatism is. You don't know jack shit about conservatism, and maybe you should actually talk to some conservatives so you can actually understand what conservatism genuinely is. The label in and of itself sounds like, well, I'm just conserving things. It's like, well, the label, if you were to say something like conservative, for example, in I don't know, like pre-American colonies in Europe, then that would probably mean a lot different to conservatism today. These labels kind of change, and they're kind of amorphous. If you just look at generally, like, the idea, because conservatism as a moniker, I don't even think it necessarily has the greatest name, honestly, and this confusion isn't necessarily anybody's fault in particular, but it is the fault of somebody for not actually for talking about shit that they don't understand. Frankly, like, it is your fault that you don't know what conservatism is, and you were just going to look at the word and the word root in and of itself and be like, they're just conserving the status quo. It's like, no, if I wanted to conserve the status quo, then I'd be on your side, because you are the status quo right now. You are the most vocal person. You are the contingency of every single massive corporation. You are the contingency of every single person in the bloody leftist hive mind. Like, that's what I would be trying to do if I wanted to uphold the status quo just for the sake of the status quo. I'd be doing snot rockets out my window, out the window of my private jet. That would actually be really intense. Poke your head out the window of your private jet, flying over country. Just do, yeah. Screw those guys. They don't understand how important I am with my caviar and my bloody everything. Like, no, it's not about status quo. It's about principles. It's about conservative principles. And if you actually, like, just Googled, like, what is conservatism, and then, like, look at maybe an article that one person wrote, or, like, listen to, like, a single clip from Ben Shapiro, then maybe you'd understand a little bit more. But all you do is listen to like a clip from Ben Shapiro with a billion people and the commentary over it that validates your perspective. There's no explanation. There's no exploration of what people actually believe. There's only just, I need my confirmation bias and I need it now. That's what it is. You don't understand conservatism, and it's clear by the way that you define them, because you define them as simply trying to preserve things, like for the sake of preserving them. There's nothing worth preserving inherently about the status quo. Like the status quo is only worth preserving if the status quo is inherently good. It's part of the reason why I'm against the judicial concept of stare decisis, of precedent, where it's like, no, I'm with Clarence Thomas on this one, on this one, that there is this, we should actually just go for correct principles, and we should actually just see if they were correct on the way that they made that decision. Like, let's actually go for principle. Let's actually go for, wanting to preserve what's actually good and not what is just prevalent. Because if conservatism was just trying to defend what is prevalent, then the Republican Party would not have been the vehicle for conservatism in ending slavery, like in taking control of the Union government to be able to wield the power against the South and to actually defeat them. And again, when it comes to conservatism, when it comes to free markets, the entire reason they lost that war is because, believe it or not, when you tell people that you actually own their labor and that they didn't actually build anything that they built, and that all of their labor is just yours for the taking, all of their personal life force, the essence, the fruits of their labors, they don't actually get to keep it, and then it's all for you, causes things to fail. So please explain to me how conservatism doesn't have anything to contribute. Because does Marxism, because didn't really help too much when people were trying to own the labor of other sovereign human beings in the South, and for the entire rest of human civilization and society throughout history. Every single place where there was slavery in the world, which was basically everywhere, this idea of like might makes right, all of those places, if you want to talk about progress, human progress was significantly destroyed, hampered, held back by these thoughts about labor, that other people can just own the fruits of your labor. No, I want as many people to be rich as possible, and I want those people to be able to earn their own labor, earn the value and to reap what they sow. And it seems like people on the opposite end just want people to sow but never reap anything that is negative. It's like, well, okay, but if you plant a bloody mine and you go to reap it, it's going to blow up in your face. If you plant a tree and you go to reap it, then it's probably going to go and it's going to be a tree, and you can pick some apples off of there. You may wish for an apple or an orange, but you will get a peach.
Are just conserving the status quo, or trying to bring back past ideas people left behind because folks didn't like those ideas.
That's what it was. That's what conservatism was. You get it, guys? Like why don't you understand that people they didn't like those ideas, and that you're trying to conserve or bring back those old ideas, and they just didn't like those ideas. You are completely and utterly blind to reality if you think that this is what conservatism is. That we're just, they're just old ideas, and those ideas went away because we didn't like those ideas. No. I've already explained plenty that that's not what conservatism is. But part of the reason why some of these ideals have left is, I don't know, maybe people didn't like those ideals. Maybe they didn't like those ideas. But just because they didn't like them, does that make them right? Because this is inherently a democratic position. If you go and do the same retarded thing that he's doing with these words here, where it's just like, when you look at the democratic, where it's democracy, that's the word root, and it goes to democracy, and democracy is just mob rule. Like, if that's what we're going to look at, where it's just like, well, people didn't like those ideas, and if they didn't like those ideas, then they reject those ideas, and they won because they voted on it democratically through mob rule. And it's like, alrighty then, and this is what inherently made me a conservative. Is I was ignorant, and I used to have some videos that I talk about this, but I was actively at like the age of like 16 or something making videos on YouTube, and maybe they'll resurface at some point. I've currently got them like privated and put away on an old playlist, but I was making these videos, and one of the things that I had said is, you actually believe that consensus equals correctness? Because it's just one of the first things that I learned as a kid, where it's just like, okay, well, in order to be objectively correct, you could just poll everybody on it, and then if everybody was polled on it, then we could get a sum total of every single opinion on Earth, and then that would be objective fact, wouldn't it? And it's like, well, no, people can believe wrong things. The vast majority of humanity has believed wrong things for a really long time, and identifying principles and trying to live up to them is what the entire goal, I believe, of identifying how the world works and how we can actually live up to these things is sort of the entire idea of conservatism. But it's funny that's sort of the perception of this, that there's just people just didn't like those ideas, and because there were all of these people who rejected those ideas, that made them wrong. It's just like, give me a single example of when that has actually worked, where people just didn't like the ideas and they just rejected it. And this is the thing, every single generation has gone, they're born, they're young, they get raised by their parents, and they rebel against their parents. They say, my parents don't know better, they don't have my best interests at heart, I'm gonna do my own thing, I know what's best for me. And then they grew up and they became old and they raised their own kids, and then every single generation ended up saying, kids these days, they just don't understand. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny that it works that way. I wonder why that happens. Because every single time people reject ideas because, I don't like that idea. You're just an old person, and you're old, and you're not with it. You're not with the times, and you don't understand how things are, and you don't understand like what's going on. You don't understand my feelings, my agenda. You don't get it. You're outdated. You're old. I don't want to hear it from you anymore. And then they end up growing up, and they end up getting just slammed by reality and realizing, oh wait, my parents actually, or maybe not my parents in particular, but the people who came before me were actually operating off of human experience. They were operating off of years and years, countless years. We don't even know how far back human history goes. That they're operating off of these years and years of human history of reverse engineering of what I believe to be God's creations. And you are going to take all of that wisdom, all of that collective wisdom of passed down generation to generation, that this is the way that life works. This is the way that reality works, and you just have to suck it up and get over it and actually incorporate that into your way of living, because that's reality. And if you can't accept reality, then you're going to be miserable your entire life. You're going to reject reality in that way? Is that just what you're going to do? Just because, I don't like that idea. Okay, and I don't like that I have to get up every single morning and go to work, or that I have to, I don't know. I enjoy work. I just don't necessarily enjoy the work that I'm in right now. I obviously wanted to get a different career, get my career up and running, a show on the road. But, I may not like, the fact that I can't just be happy all the time. I may not like the fact that other people disagree with me. I may not like the fact that, that things are going to bother me in life. I may not like any of that, but I have to accept it, because if I don't accept that, then I'm just going to be miserable my whole life, because I'm not going to be able to say, okay, things are going to be hard. Life is going to be hard. I'm going to have to deal with that. Okay, set that aside. What am I going to do about it? Because there's what I can control and what I can't control. Would I rather focus all my time focusing on what I can't control, or focusing on what I can control? That's what conservatism really is. Where you're just, I don't like those ideas. It's like your problem's not with me, and your problem's not with my parents, or with your parents, or with really anybody's parents. Your problem is with reality. Your problem is that you just don't like that reality is the way that it is, because that actually requires something of you. It requires you to to buck up. It requires you to actually put in some effort. It requires you to do something. And you don't want to. You just inherently, you don't want to actually live up to standards and ideals, and you don't want to be held accountable. You don't want to reap what you sow. And I say tough shit, because nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can take away the consequences of your actions from you, because that is inherent to reality. It's at the atomic level, equal opposite reaction. You are going to have consequences based off of your behavior. And if you were wise, you would look at your behavior, understand how that behavior leads to consequences, and then modify your behavior in order to get the greatest consequence. I believe that we are inherently scientific in that we understand that that's the way that things work, but sometimes it's just really hard for us to see it. And a lot of the time we wish it to not be true. But, you know, how ignorant and condescending do you have to be to say that here's a false definition of conservatism, and they're trying to bring back these old ideas, and those ideas are gone, and which they're not. That they're absolutely not. You're living in a place that is rife with the consequences, the positive consequences of those ideas. The entire reason we are on the internet right now, and that we are both being represented by, you know, these self-representations of ourselves, these avatars online, and that we can even speak about this in the first place. That you can pay somebody, that I can pay somebody in order to create a design, or in order to, you know, create a software, or to use a software, or to do whatever. The entire reason that we have all of this is because of those ideas. And you are just going to outright reject them because you just put them into a group of, I don't like that. Why don't you like it? It's because you have an unhealthy relationship with reality. And the sooner you realize that, then the sooner you will stop being a pompous little prick and saying that you just know better than everybody. Little humility goes a long way here. And, you know, saying, oh, well, those rubes, those conservatives, they just don't know things, and they just don't understand that these aren't popular. Hey, buddy, when you appeal to popularity, appeal to popularity fallacy, things don't always go your way. And you can deny it all you want, in order to kind of try and to save face and to save your ridiculous, confirmation bias and whatnot. You can do that all you want. It's not going to profit you in the end to deal with things that way. I don't know why I was in the wrong. Ridiculous. I hate YouTube sometimes, like the way that it just won't actually go. The entire reason I had it on 720p is for some reason my secondary monitor over here does not want to be able to do 1080p 60 on this 1080p 60 screen. And it's something to do with like the DisplayPort cable or the controller on the monitor. I don't know. So I have to set it to 720p, but it doesn't automatically set it back to HD. It's just, it's bloody stupid. It's something to do with codecs, and I don't know. I don't know what is wrong with it. It just really, really hates to do it. Anyhow.
Bring back past ideas people left behind because folks didn't like those ideas. For example, conservative furries just want to segregate genders for bathrooms, which is just a normality, so nothing would really change beyond virtue signaling if they ran a con. But
this is an interesting idea, right? That so he's saying that it's a normality that you actually have gender separated bathrooms. That's just normal. It's like, okay, but people are trying to tear down that old idea, as you say. Oh, people don't like that idea that this is a normal thing to just have gender separated bathrooms, or sex separated bathrooms, if I'm not going to use grammatical terms incorrectly. These sort of sex separated bathrooms, like that's just normal. So that for you to say we're going to separate those bathrooms like that, that's just a virtue signal. It's just like, is it really? Or is it potentially something that you should actually do so that you can avoid certain confrontations and certain potential crimes from occurring? Because there are going to be people within your con that don't behave so well, that might be not actually considering like the effects of their actions. There might be some people who are like, maybe I'm gonna go into the female restroom and I'm gonna like heaven forbid, touch somebody inappropriately, like assault somebody, like it's almost like maybe it should be a normality that there's a space where we can actually protect women, because a lot of those men don't really respect the safety of women, because they think that makes right, like many people on the left may believe, like that, oh yeah, because I get more out of it than you get out of it, I can just violate your freedoms, I can violate your soul. Like, it's just, oh, that's just a normality. It's like, well, okay, but why does it exist? Why does it exist? Why is this a rule? This is the you got to give it the Chesterton test. Why is this fence here? Why is it here? Where instead of just, oh, this is an old idea, it's like, yeah, you've inherently failed the Chesterton test, where it's like, oh, people didn't like those ideas, people didn't like those fences, so they tore them down because they were in the way of progress. TM. So that was there for a reason, and I don't know why you thought that it was a good reason to just tear that down, but guess now you're gonna have to have other people reap the consequences of your poor decision making, your poor I don't know, just bad ideas. Because there's a difference between old ideas that people don't like, quote unquote, and bad ideas, which is what you've got.
More progressive cons have neutral bathrooms, so anyone can enter. Why is this better?
Yeah, why is it better? Well, the reason why it's better is why it can be considered as better is because people are far less likely to have an absolute meltdown, because or to go out of their way to break those rules. I think for the vast majority of businesses, you can say, well, the way that it is, and it's a biological reality, is that it has nothing to do with sexuality. It just has to do with sex. Is that we're a sexually dimorphic species, and there are inherent differences between male and female, and that, if you are male, regardless of the way that you look, you should probably be going into the male bathroom. If you are female, regardless of the way that you look, you should probably be going into the female bathroom. And generally, in a private space such as that, you should probably not be doing anything that generally puts other people, like, that puts other people on the spot, makes them feel uncomfortable. Like, generally, you should sort of regulate your own behavior as to not put people into strange, compromising positions in that sort of a situation. Like, there's sort of that. Like, that's sort of the entire, like, motivating reason for why the Chesterton Wall is here. But, like, I think when you can actually assume that the vast majority of people are like, well, yeah, we are a sexually dimorphic species, and I actually do believe that that there are differences between the sexes, and that actually, if a man were to go inside the women's room, then that would be a violation of a rule that we have in place for a good reason. We've segregated these spaces so that women can actually feel safe, and also not disgusted with often what the behavior tends to be with men in not really maintaining those facilities or having much respect for those facilities, due to the fact that men just have a lot more animalistic tendencies as an inherent biological reality, because testosterone is our cross to bear. It kind of sucks a lot of the time. But, like, the entire reason that you would want to have a non-segregated or just a neutral, where they just have a stall, every single place has a stall, and it's just a separate room for every single one of them, and there's no under the floor, and there's no, like, every single one has a sink, and every single one has like all of that. The reason you want to have that is because, well, perhaps it might save you a certain amount of money, perhaps it might not. Depends on how thin the walling is, I suppose. But you don't want too thin of walling, because then it no longer ends up being gender neutral, because you might end up with a couple of body parts in glory holes, and that is inherently not gender neutral. This is the type of thing that you have to watch out for with this type of a con. But it's just the clientele that you are serving generally, because there is a certain amount of people within the very demographic. I don't really like the word community because I think it's just been overused and misused, in that the definition has kind of changed beyond a sort of a normal use. So I just like to use the word demographic because it's more holistic. It makes more sense. Really gets across what I'm going for a lot better, I believe. But just sort of looking at it from that perspective of there's a lot of people here who probably don't believe in a sexually dimorphic species anymore and in differences between the sexes, and some people might actually weaponize the fact that that is the case, and they're going to say, actually, I can go into whichever one that I please because I don't think that the rules of society apply to me, because my ego is more important than the general rules and social fabric and decorum that we all agree to here, because I'm better than everybody else, and my own personal self-satisfaction is better than everybody else. This is inherently what leftism brings. What anti-conservatism brings is just a worship of the self. This is what happens when you try to supplant higher values and perhaps the worship of a higher being and a sense of obligation towards the rules set by a omnipotent, higher, perfect being. You inevitably end up just worshiping yourself and taking all of the liberties and rights of somebody else, and putting those second to yours. One rule for me and another for thee. I get rights and you don't. It's all right. It's okay when we do it. So when you have a significant amount of people who might believe that type of a thing, well, you don't necessarily not want their money, because as you do want to be able to make a certain amount of money from that. If your entire purpose is to run a con, you want people to be able to come, and you want them to be able to engage. And there are going to be some people who aren't comfortable with going in one bathroom. They're not comfortable with whatever it may be. And I actually do believe that it's a lot safer in general. If we're going to have like a room and you walk into that room and they've got a ton of stalls in that room, then if that's the way you're going to go about it, and there are going to be people where it's just like, well, because I look like a woman, I can go in this one. It's like, or because I try to look like a woman, I can go in this one. And if anybody actually calls me out for being like, hey, you're a man, then I can just call them a bigot, because you've handed them that excuse. You have to realize that you had a part to play in this. You've handed them that excuse. The more progressive cons, like, that's something good. Like like the entire reason that we have to be here is because you've handed people an excuse. You've given them actually, and this is the thing. Conservatism. When you become a parent, you inherently become more conservative because you actually realize that you have to have discipline in order to be joyful, and you have to teach your child to have discipline in order for them to be joyful. You have to teach them consequential Pavlovian responses, because inherently we live in a world of consequences. This reality is not going to be kind to you if you don't actually realize that, as I've said a billion times already. But if that's, if you reject all of that, then you're just going to say, well, but this person, even though they're being really childish and they're being really, really abnormal about this, they still have dignity, though. They still have feelings. So it's like, you couldn't just discipline them and say, no, you don't get to break those rules because there's a reason why those rules are in place, and I'm going to enforce them so that at least you know that you can't break them. And this is why you have a breakdown in every single democratic city, is that they don't actually understand cause to effect. There's no relationship between cause to effect in the mind of a Democrat. There's just like, oh, those people are so, those people are so mean. Those people are so mean to me, and I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna show them by bankrupting myself, or by causing genuine, like, some really poor consequences towards just innocent people. I'm so compassionate. It is never compassionate to feed into people's delusions and to grant them some sort of a false sense of hope or legitimacy or validation because of their delusions. Actually, you probably should never do that. Probably generally a good idea to not allow people to fall into delusion, to mainstream delusion. And that's just big part of the leftist playbook, isn't it?
Because it's a really nice experience. Sometimes hotels will split up the men's and women's bathroom via a 2-minute walk down a hallway when it's empty. So
I don't know what this is about. What does he mean it's a really nice experience? Like, I tend to agree that I'd rather have to like just an individual stall, because it's just like, why do you have to have this be like a sort of communal place that everybody goes in inherently anyway? It's just like nobody wants to be pissing right next to somebody else. Nobody wants to be like washing hands with other people. Maybe it's sort of a male thing mostly. I feel like males would prefer to have stalls where there's like just nothing in between, because at least sort of in my perspective of viewing human behavior, that males tend to not want to make eye contact, see anybody else, acknowledge anybody else. It's just like, I'm just here to do the business and I don't want to hear anything. Like, it's just like, this is just not something that I'm, unless they're like mucking about. And that's also a big reason why most male bathrooms tend to be restrooms, I should say, tend to be pretty unkempt, is that they are far more likely to misbehave. This is kind of a thing. Female misbehavior tends not to manifest in exactly the same way. Well, no, but female misbehavior practically never manifests in the way that male misbehavior tends to. Regardless, I want to understand what he's talking about here.
Split up the men's and women's bathroom by a 2-minute walk down a hallway when it's empty. So by making them neutral, you decrease the time spent away from the con or the distance traveled through crowds with a full bladder, meaning you can get back to the con quicker and calmer. Thus, the con is actively being improved by gender-neutral bathrooms for that reason alone.
Well, it's not because they're gender neutral. It's because they're not actually like communal. Isn't that what he's saying? I'm not certain what he's saying about like the hallways. Like the hallways are empty, and so they split the like. I don't know what he's talking about when it comes to that. But generally, I think it would be like more efficient if you walk into the there's a big old room and there are no sinks in it, or like if you're at a convention type of a deal where every single restroom is just one room, and they're just like, this entire section of this wall is where like just a billion restrooms are, and there's a door, and you open up the door and there's a sink and there's a toilet and there's a urinal and there's paper towels and your general toiletries and whatnot. Like, I think that would, yes, be far more efficient, but it's not because they're gender neutral, it's just because they're universal. Like you don't even really have to use a term gender neutral on it. You just have to say you could just say universal. Like I don't exactly understand why that is a concept like that it's like, well, the con is better because they're gender neutral. It's like, well, maybe we're just experimenting more with and I think this was happening before there was this massive push to have like gender neutral restaurants in particular. I think it was just sort of a natural consequence of capitalism, where it's just like, okay, well, cause to effect relationship here, it's more effective to just have individual stalls, and if people queue up for those individual stalls, and they can just go to whichever one, and it doesn't matter what it is, it's just universal, it's just more efficient that way. It really doesn't have anything to do, it just has a natural consequence of also not really being as much of an issue with having like this one's for men, this one's for women, and people are like, but I wish I were a woman though, and so they walk right in, and it's just like, well, just because you wish you were doesn't mean you are. You can't actually just snap your fingers and change that, because if you could just snap your fingers and change that, then wow, that'd be interesting. That'd be real interesting, wouldn't it? But we're not there yet, and I don't believe we're ever going to be. So because we're not there yet, why are we trying to change fundamentally the way that society functions? It's like, well, okay, but we're not there, all right? Like, you can be respectful to somebody and respect somebody's dignity without being forced to feed into their delusions and to refer to them by their preferred pronouns. It's like, actually, you don't have the right to. I can refer to you as in whatever way I bloody well want. And if I just want to piss you off, then I'm just going to do whatever pisses you off the most. And maybe if you actually wanted to be empowered, maybe if you believe that you were in control of your own emotions, thoughts, actions, behaviors, and that you were in control of your own life, then you wouldn't have a pissy fit every single time somebody calls you a name. It's like, if I call you a jackass, is that going to offend you? But if I call you your literal biological gender, you're going to ree at me like, really? That's interesting. That's a bit interesting. It really doesn't have anything to do with that issue, frankly. Like, I don't know why it's even being brought up as like, oh, the gender neutral bathrooms are making it better. No, it's just a more efficient system in general. I don't know why that has to be the case. And also, I think there still has to be, I think it makes it easier in the sense that, you can still be safe and sort of protected and private without, like, I don't know. I think maybe the case to be made that that restrooms need to be sort of all of the men go over here and all the women go over here is so that when somebody actually is being when somebody goes into some place they're not supposed to, then they can actually be held accountable because there's more than one person intended to be in that place at a time, and they can generally call them out due to it. Where it's just like, hey, you're not supposed to be in here, and it actually puts a nail on the head. Right, it stops somebody in their tracks before that happens because there are too many witnesses, or perhaps that there are enough people that they can actually potentially have to, if they need to use physical force in order to remove or to negate a threat from somebody, then it's a lot easier too, because all the gals are in there and they're all gonna like whip out their steel, which would be based. I think women would, because I want to protect women, I want more women to be armed. But sort of the way that I see it, like, for example, when you walk into the theater, you go in, you buy your tickets, you buy your food, and then you walk up, or whatever the order is. Sometimes it's going to be a bit different, but when you walk up, there's going to be a ticket inspector person, and they're going to be like, okay, tickets please, tickets, and they're going to be like Polar Express, but they'll take your tickets and they'll say, all right, you got your tickets here, go to that one, and they just end up going. If it actually creates this is part of the reason why I think I don't remember which founding father said, but this country is for a moral and religious people. Somebody who's raised well and who's well adjusted is actually not even going to think that it's an option to just walk right past somebody who is just like, hey, it's my job to make sure that you have your ticket, because that actually creates a social roadblock, when actually if you were sort of just like a Machiavellian type of character, if you weren't raised quite properly, or there's sort of screw loose in you, then you'll just walk right by, because you know that there won't actually be real consequences for that, unless you've been shown those consequences from a young age, because you learn this from a very young age. If you just walk right past somebody and their entire job is to stand guard there, then they're going to be like, oi, get back here. Like, what do you think you're doing? You didn't talk to me. It creates a social consequence, and social consequences don't even require violence, obviously, because of social consequences. It's just human interaction, but it actually does create sort of a gridlock against people, where a man doesn't want to be seen walking into the women's restroom. So he's far less likely to walk into the women's restroom because of that. He's far less likely to walk in there and camp out and wait until a victim can walk in, where some mother or father allowed his or her little 4-year-old girl to go in there, and then he can just grab her and do whatever he likes with her in the stall, because he's a predator. Like, I think that's kind of the case to be made for that. It's something I was kind of thinking about a little bit earlier this just earlier today, I think. But I don't know, if you open up a one room stall, like, there's not really any chance for anybody to sort of be hiding behind the door, or like, there's not a lot of room in there. And if you see someone in there, you're gonna be like, oh, sorry. and you're going to walk off. Like, now, obviously, everybody who is alone is going to be at a far higher risk of having some sort of an altercation like that, or some sort of an uncomfortable situation, in the very least, happen. And those consequences should obviously be avoided, which is why it's important to behave in a way that keeps you out of dangerous situations. Obviously, if you end up in a dangerous situation, it's not necessarily your fault for ending up in the situation, because the guilty person is the guilty person. It just means that there are things that you can do to avoid those situations in which you are at risk, and you should behave in a way that makes sure that you are not going to be put at risk. So I think that's sort of the case to be made for that. But I don't know, like it's not like it is really the greatest issue, but I believe, especially at cons, when there's so many people around, it can easily become, you could easily end up with a lot of issues, and that's part of the reason why this you got to have your effective security, and you've got to have everything's got to be enforced. And when the society in general doesn't enforce things, and you've got like the bystander effect and whatnot, where people don't actually speak out, goodness sake, people don't fight for what's right, people don't speak out for that, then you immediately are just like, well, now I have to rely on the government in order to do this. And it's just like, come on guys. But management is important in these types of events. But I don't know. He asked the question. I'm 1 minute in, and I've given him like a billion answers so far. So obviously this would fall on deaf ears, and I know he wouldn't be one to watch this kind of an input. But perhaps I'll continue.
There's more. People don't have to be judged for which bathroom they pick. Friends can stick together.
Who judges people for which bathroom they pick necessarily? Like, it's kind of funny that is the first consequence that you go to, is like, oh, people getting judged. It's just so bad. It's so awful that people get judged for choosing these bathrooms that they want. It's just the preferred restroom. Like, really? Like, that's the real crime here, is that people don't get to go wherever they wherever they so please, in regards to a space that is particularly intended to protect biological females. Like I think you're actually misunderstanding where your rights end and where other people's rights begin, because you do have the right to try to feel sort of validated and self-respected. You don't have the right to force anybody to try and do that for you. And there's a significant level of force involved in going into a female space that is a protected space for females, to ensure that they are protected from males. Just a separate little separate place there, right? That you think your feelings are more important than going in there, and you can just go in there and you have the right to say, no, you need to sit down and shut up, and you need to actually see my balls as I change in the changing room. It's like, you're just disgusting, aren't you? Like it's just awful. Like, why do people behave in this way? Why do people think this way? Why do people think that that is actually more important than the rights of people to be able to have a space in which they can avoid being in a compromising position that actually genuinely gives them fear for their safety? Because inherently you have a private space. That's what a restroom is. It's a private space. And when you have that private space, and now that private space is somewhere where both men and women can go into them, it's a little bit of a recipe for disaster, wouldn't you say? Like, I genuinely do think that there's a pretty decent case to be made against that. But I think it really is indicative. Again, another like little Freudian slip there, that it's like, oh, that it's more important for people to not be judged by the restroom they pick. It's like, well, you should be judged for picking a restroom in the first place, because that's not the point. Like, if trans people were just saying, like it was better when it was just transvestites, because you weren't castrating anybody, and the people who were castrating themselves, they were making those decisions, and they reap what they sow. If it's okay for them and they can deal with that, and that's actually better for them, because it ceases a testosterone circulation or whatever it is, and it might make them more feminine, then it's like, okay, man, you can choose that so long as you're past 18. And generally, if you castrate past 18, it doesn't really have the same effect in stopping the testosterone circulation quite as much. And that's why they want to do puberty blockers, but it's kind of fucking bad for you. It's kind of bad. It's kind of not good for your mental and physical health in the long run. Like, have fun having very easily shatterable bones because your bone density is incredibly small. Aiden Paladin participated in a study when she was younger, before she had hit puberty, where they tested out some of these puberty blockers on her, and didn't go so well. It was a particular drug. I'm certain she's talked about it. If people want to look that up, it's an interesting topic. But as I say, it's telling. It's telling that is sort of the excuse with these people, is that your feelings matter more with what you pick and feeling judged for picking in the first place, when actually that's not the point. Because if most trans people, as I say, with sort of the transvestites, that I just dress the way that I feel like dressing, and it just validates me, it makes me feel good, and I get the adoration of other people around me, and maybe there's some sort of a sexual currency that I get from it as well, and I can interact with other people who are similar. Like, this is kind of the way that sort of the gay culture, I suppose, the gay rights movement and whatnot was happening in sort of like the 70s and 80s. It was just like, well, I can just do what I want. It's America. I can just go and do this. And, it was unfair when people were targeting me, and I still have rights regardless. And, I can just be gay or bi, or I can just wear a skirt if I want to. And if people want to mold at that, they can mold at that. But I'm doing things with my life in a way that doesn't affect anybody else's. And, the moment that it starts to affect other people's, then I'm going to say, well, wait a minute, we need to actually stop this. And that's what I think is is the direction of things going, is that there's going to be more people like me who are, openly bisexual, but, don't just want to like parade it around, like literally parade it around. It's just like, yeah, no, that's not what we do. We're actually disowning a lot of this sort of ideas, these ideas about what's the word? I don't know, that feelings matter more than facts, I suppose. Like it's like, no, it still says that legally speaking, I am male. It still shows that like, I don't know. It's like this is the sort of the situation that I'm in, and that I can just go into the restrooms. And here's the thing: if you had people who were trans who were just able to say, well, it's like, well, yeah, biologically I'm male, but that's a completely different thing to how I prefer to be dealt with, and so I just prefer to go by female pronouns, and I prefer to be sort of treated as you would a female, and I prefer to sort of, dress myself up into this sort of a general aesthetic of what I perceive to be female, and I've sort of applied that to myself for whatever reason, but that doesn't actually change my biology, then you're not actually losing the plot with that, and the vast majority of people, I think, would be able to be susceptible to that, or susceptible? What's the word? They'd be friendly to that, and there's a lot of people who are friendly to that, who don't really think as much about it. It's just like, yeah, I mean, they're just doing their thing, right? Like, it's not really an issue, right? But you actually will make more people bigoted by trying to force it down people's throats. Like, there's not going to be an acceptance of you if you force people to accept you. You should just, say, the American flag, that's for me. I don't need my own pride flag. This is how Martin Luther King Jr. actually had a successful bid for the hearts of the American people. Is he said, this flag also represents me. These principles also are for me. All of them still apply. And put it into that vernacular where the vast majority of American people were like, yeah, they are. And this mistreatment is wrong. Like, most people, I think, will be able to come along with that, but the reason why you can't do that is because you generally hate America. You generally hate and, by definition, are bigoted because you don't actually understand conservatism. And so you reject conservatism at its face. And now you have to deal with this sort of cognitive dissonance on a 24/7 basis.
Can help avoid creepy, harassing folk. In fact, a higher traffic flow probably means...
Creepy, harassing folk? As in, like, just generally someone who is, like, creepy and or trying to be sexual or whatever in a restroom or something like that. Like, yeah, that's generally why it's intended to be a private place. But the reason why more people are creepy and harassing is because less and less people have been parented well. Because we've been trying to dissolve the nuclear family in every single way. And it's like, well, people are going to behave a little bit more poorly at that point. It's like, I don't know what you expected when you tore down those ideas that people didn't like.
And stick together, which can help avoid creepy harassing folk. In fact, a higher traffic flow probably means a quicker response time where anyone can come in and help, which actually completes the goal conservatives pretend to care about.
Anyone can come in and help with what? Like, with if some sort of an issue happened? Like, if some sort of an altercation happened? Because I don't know, if you are in a situation, and this sort of harks back to this sort of concept of, like, if you shoot randomly into a crowd of Trump supporters, you hit a father who's a firefighter who's protecting his family, and you kill him and he dies protecting his family. But if you, like, shoot into a crowd of leftists, like with Rittenhouse, it's like, okay, bam, bam, you've got a wife beater, a child molester, and another child molester. It's like, that's interesting. But this sort of entire concept, I think there's a big reason why you have furries, and then you have a pretty significant overlap with furries and the LGBT, and I think the vast majority of the furries tend to be leftist or, in the very least, liberal. In the American definition, the modern American definition, the classical definition of liberalism was just like, I like liberty. Liberals nowadays don't like liberty, and that's kind of more like the definition of fascism, if you can actually understand what that means, if you can actually compute that.
Protecting women in restrooms, but conservative furries don't seem to think about that, and only see it.
Of course, we think about that. That's all we've been talking about this entire time. It's not an excuse. You could at least give me the benefit of the doubt that I actually believe what I'm saying here, but you don't, because you don't listen and have any conversations with people with which you disagree, and you don't try to appeal to them. And this is the thing, it's hard to talk to leftists a lot of the time. They don't want to hear it. A lot of the time they don't want to hear it, but what do? I continue to try and speak with them so long as they're willing to speak with me, and I try to appeal to them so long as they are willing to listen, so long as they are willing to try and understand more often. And maybe if they were doing that, then some of their ideas would be able to, the best parts of their ideas would be able to live on. But instead, they're going to end up killing their ideas by trying to enforce them through, tyranny. And this is not necessarily a literal tyranny, but this is a cultural tyranny that is here. This is an attitude of tyranny where you actually don't care about freedom. You think that people's feelings matter more than their safety, like physical safety. You think threatening someone's feelings is more threatening to their physical safety than actually threatening their physical safety. I don't get it. I really don't understand. I don't think there's a valid case to be made about this.
Care about protecting women in restrooms, but conservative furries don't.
But see, that's the funny thing is, like, so he's saying if some sort of an altercation were to begin to happen, there would be a faster response time from anybody else, security or otherwise, because it would be easier to be able to tell because there's only one stall. Well, it depends. Because if each stall was just separated, I don't know, you'd have to design the stalls inherently to make it so that they are inherently safe and private, and that nobody could, hide inside of them. So you're not going to want to have, ceiling tiles. You don't want anybody to be able to, crawl up there, unlock the lock, crawl up there, and hide up in the ceiling tile, and then just suddenly descend upon a poor woman, sitting on the toilet after she finally took out a fursuit, took a fursuit head off, or people taking pictures or whatever the reason is. But you want them to be able to be secure, and so that nobody can sort of hide and jump out at people, because it's a private space. But if it's a private space, it also has to ensure that nobody else can invade that private space or take somebody into that private space and to violate them within that space. I don't know, there's a lot of factors to account for here when you're talking about security and you're talking about the safety of your guests. But generally, I do think that, yes, that would help, but I don't also see how, because I was also saying that about the sort of deterrent that you have. I think the only reason why you can't really deter them with the separate restrooms anymore is because people inherently just want to violate those separations in the first place. It's like, okay, whatever, you want to violate those separations, whatever. Now we're just going to have every single stall. It's more of sort of an anal response than it is sort of like, oh, gender neutral. We're gonna these people just don't want to. It's like, whatever, because you've just been bitching about this for constantly. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, we have to deal with leftists like we have to deal with children. It's just like, okay, whatever, all right. If this is the way you want things to be, I'm gonna make it real simple and easy for you. It's like, that's just the way that it feels a lot of the time. But it's like, yeah, you could at least grant me that I believe what I purport to believe. Like, I think this incentives don't work when people inherently go out of their way to violate them. Like, having somebody there as a deterrent, standing at the front collecting tickets, it doesn't work when somebody doesn't actually care about social interaction, because they don't have a value that you should be polite and that you should actually listen to people when they say, "Oi, I need you to show me your tickets. I need you to show me your tickets, sir. Please come over here and give me your ticket so I can actually admit you. I haven't admitted you. You can't pass me by." If somebody's just like, well, yeah, piss off, and they just walk right by, then obviously that's not a deterrent anymore. But then they have to go, ratchet it up the chain of command, and then they have to come and get security there, or, whomever, right? But generally, not having as many people there kind of removes the deterrent. So if you remove the deterrent, you have to up security initially. And so, I don't know, I think there's a way that you can do it. But the entire reason why the deterrent doesn't work anymore is because people have just decided that they actually don't care about other people's safety because their feelings matter more. This is inherently evil. Obviously, it should stand to reason that this is obvious, but clearly this person has not really thought about it all that much. And I don't know, you might think you're really smart saying, oh, they think they want to protect women, but actually it's like, okay, dude, okay, right. I'm sure you were going to talk about how progressive you are and how much of a feminist you are, how much of a, like, I don't even know, man. Like, it's not very egalitarian for you to say that people's safety matters less than other people's feelings, and that we can actually, in some countries, violate your personal, inalienable rights for saying something that offended somebody due to the fact that they were offended about a particular thing because they're a particular group of people that I feel really bad for. Doesn't sound very egalitarian to me. Sounds like you're picking favorites.
Plates the goal conservatives pretend to care about, protecting women in restrooms.
Yeah, it's just rude. Like, I no, I believe it. I'm not pretending. Do I sound like I'm pretending? Have you spoken with anybody? If you think that we're pretending about this, maybe you haven't actually spoken with anybody about this.
But conservative furries don't seem to think about that, and only see it as a bad thing due to the possible scare of a criminal wearing a disguise to enter the bathroom, as if a non-secure door ever magically stopped a criminal from doing a crime in their normal attire.
Please apply this logic to the Second Amendment. Please apply this logic to the Second Amendment. So I would assume if you were applying this logic to gun rights, then you would assume that, just because there's a rule that says, hey, it's against the law for you to use a bump stock, for example, or to shoot up a place. It's kind of illegal to shoot up a place. Like, buddy, please apply this logic. Please apply this logic. Like, this makes me kind of think like, Are you going to talk about principles here, or do you only care about making arguments when it's palatable? In the case that you are currently making, in relevance to this particular thing, it's just like, well, people can't just ignore that there's a sign there, and that sign says that it's not allowed for you to do this. It's like, well, yeah, that's the reason why we have to change it now. Okay, that's the reason why, is because too many people decided that they weren't going to actually respect women anymore, which is funny. Like, it's funny because this is what's happened when this third wave feminism, or whatever we're on at this point, when that takes its course, is it inherently thinks that now that men and women are interchangeable, that we can actually disrespect women, and that we can actually make women feel unsafe by putting men in the shoes of women, by creating caricatures of women, and becoming caricatures of women, because we just wish we were women, because we think the grass is greener on the other side, even though we've never been over there. And we never will be over there, but we're going to make our grass look as much like the green grass that women have got. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, what are you even saying?
Ever magically stopped a criminal from...
Yeah, yes, please. Like, please apply this to the Second Amendment, and watch him fold. Watch him fold on this bloody principle. It's literally all just devil's advocate. Every single time, it's just like, I'm just going to make an argument in the case that tries to strengthen my case of a particular argument that I'm making currently. But if anybody ever has this on recording, like we've got this recording, you put it up on YouTube, it's like, I wonder if there's any other recordings of you talking about Second Amendment rights. I wonder how your support of Second Amendment rights are. I wonder how that has been historically for you. I wonder if you actually respect people's liberties about self-defense. I wonder if that's something, because it'd be really interesting if you could. I suspect that this individual, due to the fact that you don't even understand what conservatism even is, due to the fact that you seem to be a leftist, if not a leftist, then on the American left, that you probably don't have good things to say about that, but you will use the pro-Second Amendment arguments. It's funny that yes, dumbass. That is the entire reason why we're having this discussion in the first place, is because people have decided that they don't actually care about the rules of society anymore. What happens when people don't care about the rules of society anymore? Now you have to enforce inherent rules. And what is enforcement? Enforcement is really in self-defense. You know, do you think rapes are going to go up or they're going to go down once women start actually shooting people who try to victimize them? What do you think is going to happen? You know, once we actually tell people that there's an incentive structure and there's a deterrent that I am going to use force in order to protect myself, and you can't just overrule my rights with your feelings and your intentions, and it's like, actually you don't matter more, and I've got my own rights as well, and I've got my own risk assessments, and I want to live my life as well, and you don't just get to take that away from me on a whim. Like, you don't get to take away my dignity, you don't get to actually violate my body or my soul on a whim. Like, please apply this.
Doing a crime in their normal attire. Their solution is literally just keep it the same, and they'll somehow fix the problems people face in restrooms, which is silly.
Yeah, see, I think it is silly, but the only reason that we have to talk about this is entirely because people of your ilk have made it a problem. People of your ilk who say, but I feel so judged when I go in the restroom that correlates with my actual biological sex. I feel so judged because I don't belong there anymore, because I look like a woman, but I still have my penis and I still have my testosterone, which means I might... It's like, come on. You've created this problem by taking those people's feelings and elevating them over the rights of and physical safety of other people, of women in particular. This is not like really. It's just strange, all right. Like. Yes, it is silly, but the reason why that worked is because people used to actually have principles. People actually used to be taught correct principles, and then they could govern themselves. But now that people can't be taught correct principles anymore, now you have to govern them. Isn't that a crazy thought? That before, when we had a social fabric, people were taught correct principles, and you know, a man going along would, you know, they God forbid be a gentleman, and they'd be like, well, that's a lady, and a lady has dignity and has beauty and whatever. I don't know what's sort of the classic idea of that, but like, you know, I have to respect her, you know, inherently, because she is deserving of respect, and I don't know, some of that might be condescending to a certain degree if you look at it from the aspect of you respect is earned, not demanded. You have to earn my respect. You can't just like kind of demand it or expect it, because then you're going to feel entitled to it, and we don't want to actually encourage entitlement. But it's just interesting.
Bathrooms are weirdly contentious, so you could say that that's a bad example to point, which is silly. Bathrooms are weirdly contentious, so you could say that that's a
weirdly what? Weirdly contentious? I don't know, he slurred his words a little bit, but it's not like I can judge on that. So weirdly contentious? I don't think it's about the restrooms inherently. I think it's about the attitude that you have about not understanding why restrooms used to be separated in that way. Like, I think having neutral restrooms in stalls, so long as those stalls are done in a way that actually makes it so that they are safe, is productive. But, you know, or it's easier in a lawless society, in sort of the Wild West, where there's none of this respect for laws, respect for other people. There's no common good, and it's all just might makes right, and it's all just got to look out for numero uno. Like, yeah, when people, that's why we're here. That's why we're here, is that people aren't respecting the laws anymore, and you are on the side of the people not respecting the laws because you feel bad for them. All right, like, that's why we're here. So you can either own that, or you can just continue to for some reason blame that on these old ideas that people don't like.
Bad example to point to for a conservative-run con win. But, this is where the I'm genuinely asking comes in. What exact idea does a conservative...
What conservative idea, and in turn conservative furries, contribute to the fandom? Free markets. Free markets, buddy. Good ideas, as I say. Like, it's... How can you be saying this in... Like, you did not make this video because you wanted answers. You didn't want answers. You didn't want to actually look at, you didn't want anybody, you don't want to hear it from other people. You don't want to know, because you are saying this just in the case of devil's advocate, just for the sake of, like, oh, I'm setting my mind with a determined resolution that there is nothing good that can come out of this situation. That's what you're here for. And that's the entire point. Like, it's like, who's pretending at this point? Who's pretending to care about this? 'Cause I don't actually think you care about the input. I don't think you care. Like,
within the fandom help solve in general. Conventions are just a good way.
The conventions wouldn't exist without conservatism. Like, and problem solving would not exist without conservatism. Well, I don't know. Conservatism is the most effective ideology / method we have for problem solving. And actually, the more problem solving you do, and the more topics you deal with that involve problems, and you actually solve those problems, and, you know, think of it in a scientific way and watch the consequences of your actions and behavior, the more conservative you will become. That's what conservatism, again, is inevitable because of that, is that people are going to look and be like, oh, there's issues, and the way that we dealt with those issues created, exacerbated the issue. So maybe we actually need to put in an incentive structure. Maybe we have to disincentivize certain behavior. Maybe we have to use deterrence. This is inherently the way that the universe works, the plane of reality upon which we exist. This is inherently the way that it works. Like, what do we have to contribute? Like, everything, buddy. Like, what the question really is, what does the left have to contribute? They've never had anything to contribute, which is why they tried to nationalize everything, which is why they try to steal everything from people, which is why they try to cram down perspectives from the government sword constantly. Like, you've never had anything to contribute. You've only had things to ruin every single time. Like, you aren't even making your own case for this. Like, all you said is, and obviously minute 53, because this is just how long and drawn out we have to be with this, but
to discuss this, because those ideas can be implemented and tested with very public results.
Yeah, and they have. And you are living in a country, presumably, unless you're actually Canadian, but you're living in a country, wherever, I don't know, doesn't matter. You're most likely living in a country that has actually been the result, literally the result of all of these experiments. And we've seen how they work, and they work poorly when you actually do the progressive ideas work poorly, and the conservative ideas work. Like, is it perfect? Well, nothing ever really is perfect because it's been created by imperfect individuals. I don't know if you believe that individuals can't be perfect, because you seem to try and hold everybody to a standard of perfection only if they are people that you disagree with. If the people you agree with, then you'll make excuses for them time and again. But
the only thing I kinda can come close to seeing as a conservative idea furries would agree with is some talking point of protect the children, but even that falters. Conservative.
How does protecting children falter? How does that falter? In what way does that falter? Like, that's kind of sus, man. What do you mean? Like maybe I've just got to hear him out on that, but it's like, I don't. Do you really want the conservatism and the right to? And this is something that I've engaged with furries on Twitter in the past before. Maybe I've mentioned it on the pod before or on the stream before. But like, it's something I've talked about before with people, where it's like, hey, do you really want to concede all of protecting children and the innocence of children to conservatives and right wingers? Like, really? That's just a Republican thing? That's just a right-wing thing? Like, you want them to own that? Why can't you claim a little bit of that too? It's like, hey, I'm also anti-groomer. I'm also anti-minor attracted person. I'm also anti that. Like, you can claim that, and I'll grant you that. Like, I'll believe you. I'm like, okay, yeah. So I'm glad we can start the conversation with saying that, all right, we don't want children to be victimized because they're the most innocent people among us. Like, why? What do you mean by this? Where it's like, even protecting children falters. How? What? Why? Why is this a thing that you are saying? This is strange. This is weird. Why are you saying this? What do you mean?
Will point out that anyone under 18 should have parental supervision first and foremost at a con to protect them, which is a policy cons have already been forcing for quite some time.
Right, because it's a good idea, right.
So conservatives still complain about a rule they want, but which is already put into place.
Well, it's already put into place, but is it enforced? Because I don't know. I don't know if I've ever dealt with, because I'm not a con goer. Like, that's just not my scene. That's never really been my thing. Like, I don't know. Maybe it could be fun, but like, I've just never generally been happy with like massive crowds necessarily. And I don't know. It depends. There's a lot that sort of depends on, because I have been to like Comic-Con or whatever, but regardless, like I'm not kind of wired into this aspect of it, where is that an issue that people deal with, where there's, goodness sake, I don't know what's with my esophagus right now, no fire breathing today. Generally, like, what is that an issue that people run into, where there are children being victimized, or like grooming ending up happening, or children disappearing, or I don't know, children get brought back to the hotel room, and then they're subjected to some sort of a fursuit gay orgy, or subjected to having to witness it or being involved in it, or something. Like, is this something that's actually a problem that's happening? Because like, if we're going to discuss like problems, or like, I mean, I don't know, maybe we're just talking about general challenges, because that's kind of sort of the perspective that we've been looking at the issue with, is that, well, there's just these sort of general challenges when it comes to getting a ton of people in one location at the same time. And in particular, this demographic tends to have a lot of people who have a lot of, fetishized behaviors or whatever, or, maybe this entire con is going to be 18 plus, or because there's so much adult stuff in it, or maybe whatever it is. Maybe there's going to be a section that says no people under 18 past this point, and we're going to ID you, and we're going to have a furry in a cop suit, or we're going to have Judy Hopps there at the door, just like preventing anybody coming in. She's going to be IDing every single person. But like, I don't know, whatever it is, like, is this an issue that, practically speaking, we have to account for? Because I don't know, it's funny, because I feel like people who are on the left, when they haven't like gone full retard, have, it's like, I just like kind of some of the ideas of cultural Marxism, but like that, it's like, yeah, of course I believe that children are innocent, and that we need to protect them, and we shouldn't be like grooming them and whatnot, whatever it is. like, I don't know, it's funny. Because what I've heard sometimes is like, oh yeah, furries just hate minors, and it's just like, okay, but if you are in a community that is very sexual and you find out someone is a minor and you say, okay, no, you don't get to stay here because I don't think this is a good place for you to be. This is actually a compromising place for you to be, and you could run into some some bad situations here. And so, I'm gonna, thrust you out of the situation because it's for your own protection, and also because I don't want to be committing crimes and exposing minors, children, to content that to which they cannot consent to, that they actually don't understand. I'm not going to do that. Like, I've had people say, oh, they're so mean to minors, and they immediately kick them out. It's just like, well, yeah, but if this is a sexual, like, Discord server or something, that would be the best thing to do, is actually rejecting people who don't belong in the situation where they're talking about sexual topics with people. Like, generally what the best thing is, if you're talking with a minor and something sexual comes up, it's like, don't actually discuss that. Like, you don't have to discuss that with them, and actually you shouldn't, and actually it's kind of a moral obligation for you to not. Like, I don't know, I don't understand why some people are resistant to that. I think part of it is just because when your principle is my sexual attraction matters more than all of your old ideas that I don't like, I'm going to use that forever. I'm going to dangle that above your head for forever because it was just an unbelievably stupid thing to say. And it's the entire reason that I'm here. As I saw like 2 seconds of the video, I was like, you're bloody awful. But like, I just don't know if this is necessarily a problem that is prevalent enough that you actually have to go out of your way to fix it. Like, I mean, I suppose understanding that it's like, okay, we accept everybody who is able to come as long as they're getting these tickets and whatnot, but there's going to be certain areas that it is not actually appropriate for people to be around. But I don't know, if there's enough people who are like sex offenders who are coming, and maybe it ends up being enough of a problem. It's like, okay, now we're just going to bar everybody from being 18, who aren't 18 plus, from even coming in, because no thanks. We don't actually want to have this happening, and we are going to enforce the law and collaborate with law enforcement as much as possible to be able to prevent this stuff from happening. Like, I don't know, like, the irony that I'm detecting here is that when it comes to protecting children, there are people who haven't gone full retard on the left who will be like, well, yeah, of course I want to protect children, and there's good ways to do that, and so we're going to enforce these rules to do that. And it's just like, okay, apply that to everything else. Like, this concept of like, well, we need to actually disincentivize bad behavior, and we need to use deterrence in order to prevent people from thinking it's acceptable for them to behave poorly in a way that victimizes other people. Apply that to literally anything else. But my principle, the principles, I'm not supposed to apply those principles elsewhere. It's like, okay, come off it, man. Come off it. Like, it's a little bit silly. It's just like, well, but we already hold that. We already do that. It's like, well, yeah, it's because that's the one conservative value that you haven't decided. It's the one brick left in the wall that you knocked out because it's an old wall, and we don't like that wall, so we wanted to knock it out. It's like, there's just that one brick left there. It's like, yeah, but we still have this brick. It's like, well, yeah, you demolish the rest of it. Like, that's effectively what you're saying right now. It's like, well, we already have that rule because it's a right rule. It's just like, well, yeah, it was right, and the rest of the wall was right too, but you knocked it down.
From what I can tell, that's mostly due to topics like PUPHOODS being so visibly accessible. But here's the truth. Kids who are aware that adults do the do, and that there's clear signs of predatory behavior said kid needs to be able to spot and defend against, will be more protected than an ignorant child that is innocent.
What the hell are you saying? This is bordering on some really disgusting ideas here. Like, so you're saying that you should be allowed to walk around with inherent fetish gear like PUPHOODS, for example, in the presence of minors, and you should teach the minors that exists? Like, should minors be knowledgeable that adults have sex? Well, yeah, but are they going to be able to comprehend that? No. So you actually have to be really, really careful in the way that you teach children about what sex is and how to go about that. Like, you can't just teach them literally everything there is about sex and then expect them to behave well with that. You should be able to give them a general guideline about it. Like, you can teach them about predators. Like, I don't know, what exactly is the thing you're saying here? Because I'm very suspicious of this attitude. I want to know what the logical extension of this is, because this is sus. Like, I don't know.
You never hear about the conservatives talking about the family friend predator problem.
Family friend predator problem, issue of child sexual abuse with the perpetrators of child. Yeah, abusers can be neighbors, friends, family, school neighbors, friends, and family members. People who sexually abuse children can be found in family, schools, churches, recreation centers, youth sports leagues, and any other place children gather. Many abusers are youth themselves or are situational offenders. 90% of the children who are victims of sexual abuse have known their abuser. Yes, that is factual. 60% of abusers are acquaintances, teachers, neighbors, or community leaders. Yeah, because people who have leadership sometimes will abuse the leadership, and the, this is within this demographic. Like, this 60% is within this demographic of 90%. Though this might be just still 60% of abusers. 30% of children are abused by immediate or extended family. That's still a minority in the grand scheme of these, but only 10% of children are sexually abused by a stranger. So it seems like the issue is more with schools. Just simply based off of these, it kind of seems like there's actually more of an issue in schools than there is in families. But I also think that the issues in families are going to be far more prevalent as time goes on, when you continue to erode all sort of a semblance of moral obligation, when you supplant rules of there's a divine creator and he has a rule, he has a purpose for you, and you actually have an obligation to, because he created everything, you have to respect him, and you're created in the image of God, and so is everybody else, and because of that, then they are also worthy of respect, and you need to respect them, and it's not respectful of them to mistreat them in XYZ way. Like, when you remove that, and then you supplant that with just this sort of, but it's my truth, then that's exactly why you end up with more and more and more of this, especially if it's within the context of, like, it's no longer that the purpose of a man is to protect a woman, that God gave women men so that they could protect them. That actually, when a man becomes the aggressor to the woman, then he's actually lost his reason for existence. Like, when you remove that, it's far more likely that he's gonna be sexually abusive. Far more likely, it's gonna be bad. Is he guilty for doing that? Yes. Was he taught otherwise? No. You haven't actually gone out of your way to continue propagating good values, and so but then you get shocked when people revert to these animalistic tendencies. It's like, actually, it turns out that when you don't teach people how to be civilized, they become uncivilized and they become animals. We turn on each other like a bunch of animals. It's not at all what he sounds like. Like a bunch of animals. What is the point here, though? Because all of these are true. But what is the point? That we should worry more about families than we should worry about strangers? Because 10% of children who are sexually abused is still 10% that we could reduce. It's not about the percentage. It's about there's nothing with the proportion. Because if we reduce this proportion, presumably we'd be increasing these proportions. As a consequence, it's not the proportion that it's about the numbers. We start out the conversation with saying both you and I want the total amount of children who are abused to go down, correct? What is the best way to do that? Well, in any situation that a child could be victimized, we should set up a system of rules that prevents that child from being victimized. So it's like, are you saying you're going to say that it's, you're going to judge a family in and of itself before you judge a stranger? Like, I would certainly agree that both of them are a problem, but there's a lot more that you can do about regulating a public space than regulating somebody else's home. And funny thing about being part of the LGBT is that we're not really pro legislating what goes on in other people's homes. When it comes to, obviously, private interactions that actually doesn't have any sort of an externality. Obviously, I don't think that there should, that if a father or an uncle or whomever, a mother is abusing their child, and that child should be removed from them, because that's a massive externality where they're actually infringing on the rights of somebody who can't even comprehend what's happening to them. But it's more difficult to even detect that is going on, because you assume that the family is actually doing the right thing for their children, God forbid. And this is again why there becomes a requirement for you to governmentalize everything, for you to just have the government stomp on absolutely everybody's personal lives when you remove these values, these conservative values that you don't like from society, is that you actually have to replace them with daddy government. And daddy government has to come in and save you every single time, because you can't just you can't save yourself. You can't expect people to behave well, and you can't punish people who behave poorly. It's like, I'd be completely willing to concede this point in the case that you would also agree that that we should that rapists should be castrated or killed, especially child rapists. Should we have the death penalty for them, or should we not? Because beyond a reasonable doubt is a pretty good standard, legally speaking. Like, it's a pretty good standard. Generally, people, I think, should be able to have the best legal representation possible to be able to ensure that they aren't being falsely accused of something. But it's funny that this kind of a standard is sort of promoted. I do want to figure out what is saying.
Predatory behavior said kid needs to be able to spot and defend against will be more protected than an ignorant child that is innocent.
Well, right, but so how innocent do you want them to be? Do you want them to be exposed to puphoods in particular? Because they might just end up being curious about it. Or do you want them to know that regardless of what the individual is wearing, if some adult that you do not recognize tries to take you away, you do the stranger 911, whatever, the Dr. Phil emergency response thing, and you can actually teach a child and role play that with the child to ensure that they have practiced what to do when they're in a situation where somebody is going to potentially abduct them. And it's like, that's preparing them. You don't have to teach them about the sexual fetishes of these people, like, or expose them to the sexual fetishes of people, because anybody who's a parent does not want to actually explain to their child, well, it's just like, well, yeah, it's a BDSM thing where there's like sort of the latex, and it's also kind of, crossing with like sort of the furry aspect of it, and you're taking sort of a de-anthropomorphization where you're kind of turning them into a dog or an animal, and you kind of, it's like, child's not going to understand that, and no adult who is not a groomer is going to explain that to their child. So what exactly are you suggesting that we do, other than just simply say, if an adult is not wearing a lot of clothes and they tell you, come here, Timmy, hey, hiya there, Georgie, like you say, okay, stranger danger, buddy, like, have them role play through with you. And I don't know. The irony isn't lost on me that we're talking about BDSM and I'm saying to role play with your children. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, you walk through the situation where it's like, okay, pretend that I'm one of these creepy adults, and this is how do you respond to it? And you have them, like, they drop themselves to the ground and they start screaming as loud as they can, and they kick their feet in the air, and it's, totally impossible for them to get picked up by the adult in this type of situation. Like, that is a self-defense mechanism that actually serves pretty well into adult life. That you can kind of kick and scream, and immediately people are like, well, okay, something's going on. Especially if it's a child saying, screaming, stranger 911, then it's like, oh, this is an attempted abduction. Maybe we should step in and help this. It's like, so how ignorant are we supposed to be? How ignorant do we want the children to be about these predators? Do we want to know exactly why they get off? Do we want to try and teach them about sexuality? Like, I don't think that is a good idea. I think that's actually grooming. That's actually abusive, and they're not going to be able to comprehend that until later on. So, like, what are you suggesting?
You never hear about the conservatives talking about the family friend predator problem for
Why not?
some reason. Oh, but I don't want my...
Have you ever spoken to a conservative? Because like we can acknowledge those as much as we want to. We can absolutely acknowledge those, but like we never you never hear a conservative talking about that. Well, maybe because we're actually talking about public policy and not like family in-home policy, because there's a difference between a child, once again, being in public and being potentially abducted in a public setting from, at an event that is governed, because every single event with organization inherently has sort of a somewhat of a form of government in it. There's a difference between preventing that externality as the government in charge of this event versus trying to detect it as a government that does not have the right to just barge into any home as they please. Like, it's difficult to know what to do about that type of a situation. I would agree that I don't want that to be happening. But I don't know what you're suggesting. It's just like, we never talk about that statistic. It's like, well, actually, maybe you've never sat down and listened to a church sermon, and maybe you did. Maybe you grew up with them, and maybe went in one ear out the other here. But like, I don't know. Did you never hear about anything like this? Like, I swear I was like 11 and I was talking about like, these values when it comes to what the role of a man is in the household and all of these things. Like it was just inherently the situation that we were in, where like I was literally at like, I don't know, 10 years old giving a talk in church, and I put in my talk like it is never okay for a man to abuse his spouse or his children, or to abuse his wife or his children, because we were specifically talking about a man. And my mom was like, why are you putting that in there? Like, you're preaching to the choir here. And I'm just like, well, I don't know. It's true, isn't it? Like, it's funny because he's like, I was extremely young and I was still able to kind of understand that. And then because I was taught that when I was young, it kind of stuck a little bit, and then it continues to propagate onwards into my adulthood. The vast majority of people in families who do that weren't actually taught and had those principles ingrained in them when they were young, and so they never actually ended up realizing or learning about, oh right, like, up to daisy, sweetheart. They never put it together, and you're not going to be able to put it together for them, like at the point where like they're not going to realize until probably it's too late that they're doing significant damage. So again, I don't know what you're advocating for here. I don't know what the point here is, because maybe if you had listened to conservatives before, you would understand that they would hear about this. I mean, I don't know if Dr. Phil's necessarily a conservative, but like, you listen to Dr. Phil talk about it, and he's just like, vast majority of people who die, vast majority of people, kidnappings, or vast majority of child abuses are done so from within the family. And that's why we are so big on the role of a man in the household, is because the purpose of a man is to protect the women and protect the children, protect those who can't protect themselves, because inherently Aristotelian natural law stipulates that you are designed with power, and it is your responsibility to bridle that power, to use it for good and not for evil, to protect from evil. And in protecting from evil, you are inherently using that power for good. That philosophical that idea that you don't like is inherently what actually conservatives advocate for all the time, where we say, this family situation, it's just not the way that you're supposed to actually behave in a family. Does that mean that there will never be a family, a father in a family that abuses a child? Well, obviously, people are still going to be pieces of crap, and we should disincentivize that by prosecuting people who get into that position to the best of our ability as imperfect human beings, or non-human beings, as it may be the case for you and I. But what, like you're saying, because conservatives like families, but also families tend to be a place where abuse happens, it's not because a family is a private setting and it's effectively a monarchy of the parents governing the children, that it's such a small form of government that they actually have to first govern themselves well so that they can govern their children well. And if they don't know how to actually govern themselves well, they're going to act like animals and they're going to victimize their children. Like, but you can't detect that because it's a private setting and because it's in the family home, and you can't just like barge in whenever you want because it's called the Fourth Amendment. Fifth? I think it's the fifth. It's like none of that was ever factored into your risk assessment here. None of that was factored into your judgment. You just assume like, well, conservatives like families and families abuse people. It's like, no, good families don't abuse people. And actually, a family where abuse happens is not a family at all. It's just a group of people who happen to breed with. It's a man that happened to breed with a woman, and they stayed together long enough to actually father a couple of children, parent a couple of children, and then it just turns out that that father just didn't even care about anything to do with his purpose in life. He just wanted to be self-gratifying, and it's like, well, that's kind of the future that you create when you start to worship yourself like you do.
Kid to know about those sinful clothes. Unironically, a random stranger.
Wait,
but I don't want my kid to know about those sinful clothes. Unironically, a random stranger in full latex and a puppet is literally more covered than many of the parents or conservatives saying that statement.
What the hell are you talking about? Seriously, what the hell are you talking about? You seriously don't understand anything about conservatism, do you? Conservatives don't wear, like, conservatives... What is conservative clothing? What image does that put in your mind? Do you think of a trad wife in like a dress and it covers like everything, and the sleeves go all the way down to a like bloody, like just all of her body is covered? Or do you think of like PUPHOODS or like nipple piercings and you can see everything just hanging out scantily clad? Like really? Conservatives are less like that is just insane. Like, that you are fully delusional. We've actually gone full retard at this point, because you are now suggesting that fetish gear is less exposing than what conservatives generally tend to wear. What are you smoking? Like, please tell me that I just misheard you, because
spot and defend against will be more protected than an ignorant child that is innocent. You never hear about the conservatives talking about the family-friendly predator problem.
Yeah, you do.
For some
yeah,
reason.
You do.
Oh, but I don't want my kid to know about those sinful clothes. Unironically, a random stranger in full latex and a puppet is literally more covered than many of the parents or conservatives saying that statement.
What the heck? Like, no, okay, so I didn't mishear. My ears are not lying to me. I didn't mishear that at all. He genuinely just said that fetish gear is more covering than parents or conservatives tend to be. Like, what in the bloody hell are you talking about? Like, fully delusional rubbish here. Because, like literally just conservative clothing. Like, if you just look at, like, the first thing that shows up is, like, women's modest clothing. And I think it just tends to show up women's... This is just Utah. I just immediately... This is Utah. But it's like, I don't know. Have you ever been to a red state? Have you ever been to Utah before? Have you ever been, like, literally anywhere before? Have you ever, like, done anything outside of your little bubble on, like, Twitter or otherwise? Because it's like... Look at all of these conservatives. Look at these conservatives. Look how exposed these conservatives are. Like, look, it's like, what are you smoking? What are you smoking? Because it's just like, look, they're so exposed. They're so much more exposed, because it's like, this literally just like registers as Candace Owens in my brain. This is literally like, maybe it's the hairstyle, maybe there's something about the entire image that actually just kind of reminded me of that. But it's like, what, this you might still consider this to be relatively conservative depending on where you're going. This is still like more modest, quote unquote, than this is Utah. Welcome to Utah. Like that's still worse than these PUPHOODS. Like, very conservative, skin tight latex. Oh, so conservative. Like, this is generally referring to the hood. So conservative. Shirtless men, so conservative. Like, look at how modest they are. Like, this isn't, sexualized, obviously. Like, I don't know. If children see, like, literally just the hood, like, something like... These look weird. These look like the little, like, masks that you get, like, from a child's... child's birthday party where they're just like made of like funny like cardboard or is like faux leather or something like that. Like this is very sexualized. This is a very sexualized situation. Like just seeing, just seeing this, I don't think a child is going to immediately like, this is not going to expose them to some sort of like it's fetish gear, but it's not like inherently sexual. Like I can understand like that. I don't know, if you see people walking around like this, it's not necessarily inherently sexualized. Obviously, it's not conservative in the sense, because I mean that's just sort of the delusion of like saying like this is more conservative than the actual conservatives. I was like, okay, I was just showing you like modest clothing. This is what conservatives believe is a standard for wearing clothing. Like, but this is clearly more exposing, and it's like sure they've got like this fetish gear, but it's not like it's inherently sexualized. I still think this would be appropriate if not for the fact that, is that a Madeira strawberry thing, lanyard or whatever? But it's like here are people, puppy play expert. I wonder what you would see on this site. I wonder like if all of this clothing, which inherently is not, this isn't modest. That's not modest clothing. Like, is this appropriate for children? I genuinely want to know, because generally if somebody's walking out like this, because if they're just walking around in like, it's inherently, it's not the clothing that's sexual, but it is used within a sexual connotation, a sexual context. So like, what exactly is the limit for this? Because sure, these people might not actually be, inherently sexualizing in that case, but I mean, if you're wearing this, I don't think you should be around children. I don't think you should be around children. And it would be the exact same thing if this was a straight fetish of some kind. It'd be the exact same thing if like whatever it is. Like, generally, you don't want to like explain that to children. And it's like, well, maybe people who wear this type of clothing, even if the inherent like the molecules of the clothing aren't inherently like I don't want to run into like sus stuff, but like it's starting to get a little bit sus here, right? Inherently the assortment of molecules and the way that you stitch them together and then wear them and put them on your body and what they begin to resemble, it's not inherently sexual, but depending on the context, it might be sexual, and depending on if these people actually always will, if these people view these in sort of a sexualized context, and if they begin to behave in a sexual way, like they often do when they have puphoods at like pride parades and whatnot, and there are children at these pride parades because these horrible parents have brought them to this incredibly sexualized situation. Like I've seen here in Utah, in Salt Lake City, they have these pride parades, and they've got like these men that are just like basically entirely naked, and all they've got on is like a little like G-string with like, oh haha funny, like I put a little like literal like rooster down there, and I'm like bobbing up and down, and it's like a cock, haha funny. But it's like, okay, but that's sexual. If there's children there, then we shouldn't actually be having this happening. Like, why can't we agree to that at least? Why can't we agree that children shouldn't be exposed to literal sexualized stuff? Because, if this isn't inherently sexual and they just walk around like this and that's sort of like just what they're doing, then that's fine. If these people are behaving in a sexual way and they're putting that in public on display for everybody to see, where he's on the ground and he's, basically half naked, or if he's in like this full latex or whatever the hell, like, and he's walking around and they're putting, shoving, little toy bones in his mouth and whatnot. It's like, that's actually sexual. Like, at that point, it's pretty damn sexual. Like, there's a line to be drawn, of course, but there's a line. What I'm saying is there's a line. And I'm just wondering where you draw it exactly, because there's a line. But obviously the point that it's just like, oh, some of these people in these puphoods wear more clothing than conservatives. Like, what the hell conservatives are you like familiar with? Like, what are you talking about? Seriously, sir, what are you smoking? What crack are you smoking? I kind of wanted to see. Puphoods are valid. All right. I don't know what people mean by valid anymore. Like, what does that even mean? Yeah, this stuff. This is starting to be sexual, I think, because it's pup play, meaning sexual play. It's not really normal anymore. It's not really something that children should be exposed to.
How old do you think Daddy is? 42.
They're completely fine and a good idea for people who aren't heat tolerant, need good vision, or just can't afford a full suit. They can also be creatively designed. They aren't inherently not safe for work, just as suits aren't. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, Dad is old.
They're gross. They don't belong at cons. They're inherently sexual and are bad for the fandom's reputation.
I think he's 7.
No, I can generally agree. Like, that's a nuanced take. That's basically the conclusion that I came to, where it's like, well, they're not inherently sexual. It's just what amount of sexuality are you going to read into it? Because, this is not inherently sexual, but, some of these other examples, when you get down to this point where you actually are having people in scantily clad clothing, that is actually inherently sexual. And I would wonder what people would have to say about the differences, because, for example, drag is not inherently sexual, but what do you have to say about when it does become inherently sexual, when actually the entire point of it is to be sexual in this particular context? It entirely depends on the behavior and, what is actually being communicated. If you're communicating something sexual with the clothing that you've got and whatnot, then that has to be something that you should be aware of, and you should be curtailing that as much as possible. Otherwise, it's perfectly fine. So you can kind of piss right off with this, like, rubbish idea about, like, I genuinely don't know. Like, I totally am going to believe people like this. I'm totally going to believe people like this who say stuff about conservatism. It's like, oh yeah, you should tell me all about conservatism, man. You should tell me all about it because you clearly are the resident expert on conservatism. And then he says stuff like, oh yeah, well, puphoods are more conservative clothing than actual conservatives wear. It's like, what are you smoking? Like, genuinely, like, I need to understand what the hell you mean by that. Because generally, if you're not actually wearing modest clothing, you're not actually behaving within sort of the bounds of what conservatives believe is good behavior. So you're kind of not living conservatively. So you're kind of not really a conservative in that way, are you? That's not what conservatives believe. I don't understand what he thinks conservatives believe. So clearly this person has absolutely no credibility whatsoever on what that is. Reminder, I'm being serious about the question in the video. No, you're bloody not. No, you're bloody not. Like, it's just so stupid. Good to speculate on the idea of the debate for sure, but I do want a direct answer about the specific question, like actually handhold me through the response for the how, what, and why. Well, I think I've done a pretty good job for that, but I'm probably going to go through the rest of this video at a later time. I could be facetious and say conservative cons could split away from the conservative furs everyone from split away the conservative furs from everyone else, but that's about it. So, see, this is the issue, and this is why we're in this polarized situation where we can't even just be, loyal. What's the word? We can't even coexist anymore, because now we have to have a conservative furry-con. We have to have conservative Walmart. We have to have conservative states, and we have to have conservative. Like, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do this? Because I've genuinely, at this point, I'm like, oh, all right. Leftists don't want to move because they're lazy as hell and they're not going to, they want everybody to do something for them. So we'll just let the leftists stay where they are, and we're going to say, okay, we're all going to go out to, conservatives will move because conservatives actually want to move. Conservatives actually are willing to move in order to create a better life for themselves. Because if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. We take all the conservatives, when we put them, we're all going to go to like the middle of Kansas or something, I don't bloody know, and we're going to create like our new United States, or just take the vast majority of the red states and we're going to sanction them all off, and we're going to say, okay, you have to be conservative and this is going to be the US, and then the rest of you get to be like Marxist US, and then we get to experiment, and once a fucking again we're going to try this, we're going to play this game. Does socialism work? Does it not work? Do leftist ideas work? Do they not work? Do conservative ideas work? Do they not work? Because the American continent, the entire American exceptionalism, this entire everything that we have is a referendum on leftist ideas. It's entirely a, hey, look, we succeeded, and actually all of the things we didn't succeed on, the counterfactual here, we would have been even better. The counterfactual is that if you did not promote leftist beliefs, then we would actually be better. There would be less homeless people if you could recognize cause to effect. If you could disincentivize poor behavior, there would be less, bad things. It's like, do we really have to start physically separating ourselves at this point? Like, seriously? Do we really have to have a conservative furry con and a, like, woke furry con, a left furry con? Like, why is this the way that it happens? And this is exactly why this meme has, I brought this up last time, but this is exactly why this meme has, what do you call it? Political PCM, that's what I'm looking for. Where is it? This one. This is exactly why this has so much relevance right here. Where and red doesn't apply here because red is part of this crowd. It's literally just the right. It's like the right is like, okay, let's go and create something great. Let's go and make something great. And then leftists come in either intergenerationally, or they invade, or whatever the hell happens. And then we're like, oh, you're excluding us from all the good things. You're oppressing us. So you need to have us come by. And we're like, all right. And they come in and they ruin everything. And it's like, what? Can you just understand that your solutions don't work? They've never worked. Every single thing that is good is a result of conservatism, of good principles that at many times we've failed to live up to it. At many times have been actively rejected by your ilk. But it's just silly. What is this? They tried that and they imploded without more liberal progressive people's help. Oh, because we need your help. We need the progressive people's help. No, because one of these days, conservatism is going to sweep the nation. This generation is the most conservative generation. It's only going to become more conservative, and everybody else is going to be coping and molding and crying. But when strong men create good times, and we have an additional, whenever leftism is going to come to swoop in and push the pendulum to swing back the other way, then, it'll be indicative of how we got here. The disconnect between the left and the right of the fandom comes down to the apolitical nature of media itself. Anthro-furry art is not limited to any message, and thus you potentially get all different perspectives participating. This is funny because this idea inherently is just kryptonite to the leftist political idiocy. Because they'll be like, no, all art is inherently political. That's politics and everything. It's just like, no, you're just reading it into it because you're paranoid and insane. What conservatives ignore is the origins of our fandom. Oh, really? Because what leftists ignore is all of human history. Pratt, like what? You're gonna lecture us on being ignorant when you were ignorant of literally human nature. It was built by queer people. People who do not conform to norms. It's like, okay, so the existence of people who look at a sexual inclination and say, I actually don't want to resist this sexual inclination. I don't really think that it's a sin or anything like that. Can still be conservative. Like you can still be conservative, and that part of your risk assessment doesn't apply. Like you can still do that. Like that's what the pursuit of happiness is. Like, what do you mean? People do not conform to norms that were not approved by the culture of the time, nor even of the culture of today for the most part. and like I don't understand. From my perspective, conservative fans do nothing but judge those in the fandom they dislike. You are such a bloody hypocrite. You dislike us over disagreements, and you judge us. That's all that this is. That's all that this bloody is. It's like, I don't understand your perspective, so I'm systematically taking everything that is being said here, and I'm actually explaining it from the conservative perspective. But you know, that doesn't count for anything because, you know, conservatives, we don't really like them speaking, you know. It's like the projection here, buddy. You do nothing but judge those in the fandom you dislike. Of course you judge people who you disagree with or who you dislike for whatever reason. You do it too. Like, why is that? Why are we gonna have that conceit there? Like, there's the conceit where you know, I don't judge anybody I dislike. Like, what the hell do you think this is? That's all you are doing. If they are chaste or prudish, or straight or uninterested in trans issues, this is actually a really charitable way to say it, because most of the time it's like, no, you just hate trans people. It's like, uninterested in trans issues is a lot more charitable than most people grant it, so I can actually appreciate that. They've loudly protested with silly buzzwords, woke, you invented that term, your ilk invented that term, too political, right, because a lot of the time you can't actually say what you believe politically. You're just like, hey, actually, I don't agree with that politically, and I don't want you to just be shoving down your thoughts on me. It's like, oh, you're just a bigot. But then it's just like, actually, I think there's a relationship between behavior and a consequence, and we shouldn't actually be dealing with that because the consequences are bad. And it's like, you're just a theocrat. It's like, oh, really? It's like, spare me. Too political, Marxist, leftist, and so on. Yeah, because that is the origins of your ideology. That is your ideology. That is what you are operating off of. It is ignorance. Like, they seem like buzzwords, I think, to people who don't actually understand what definitions we're operating off of, because they're blanket terms from some very intense political ideologies. But if you were actually honest, and if you actually understood what these terms generally refer to, woke is a moniker that I don't know. I tend to not want to use that one because it is kind of a buzzword. It is kind of ill-defined. Too political is not really a buzzword because oftentimes things can be a little bit too political. Marxist it's a definition of like it's actually Karl Marx, like his ideology, like it's a blanket term, but like I don't know what you're talking about. Like leftism, it's like if you were actually honest about this and if you understood what these terms meant, then you would be like, well, yeah, Marxism and leftism, that refers to me. I'm a leftist, I'm a Marxist. Like, I've spoken with people who are honest about these things, and it actually helps in having discussions because we don't actually have to like waffle on about like a, you know, well no, I it's just a buzzword, man. It's like, maybe you should like study these things and say like, oh yeah, no, I actually do agree with that idea. But it's like, well, no, you don't know if you agree with that idea or not because you actually don't understand what you believe. You don't know what you believe or why you believe it. You just have a general knee-jerk reaction to these things. There's a bottom line for our fandom, and it's this. We are going to support the expression of people's identities. That is the first part of the sentence. I think that's really telling because if it were me, if I was saying that, is that kind of the first priority is protecting people's liberties. I'm not supporting the expression of people's identities necessarily. Like, it's like, I don't know, people can do what they want if it makes them feel good, so long as that actually does not violate anybody else's rights. Like, I'm not going to promote saying, you should express yourselves. It's just like, you know, people who want to express themselves are going to do it. like I don't have to tell people to do that. And if people are insecure about that, that's not my problem. Like, it's not my problem if someone is like, I want to express myself, and then they're like, but I'm also ashamed about expressing myself, and I feel like I can't do it. And it's just like, okay, whose problem is that? Is that a me problem? Is that a you problem? It's kind of a you problem, isn't it? Like, what are you talking about? Whether through art or signs or clothes, etc. Those who cannot tolerate that don't belong here. That is inherently like a collectivist, Marxist, leftist, woke to political, if you want to use all of the buzzwords that you've said here, that is inherently a non-conservative position. That is inherently feelings matter more than facts. That is inherently my personal view of myself. My feelings matter more than your rights. That's what that is. Like, Why can't we start with rights? Why can't we actually start there? Why rights, responsibilities, acts, accountability? That's like inherently the entire like conservative position. I don't know, not the entire one, but I mean it's a good way to put it, because it's better than just saying as I say consequences and whatnot. We have no time to listen to the protests of the people who wished the year was 1954. So thank you for maligning all of conservatives. I don't wish it was 1954. I'm glad that I live in today, because today is the best that history has ever been up until this point, because we have a lot of really great things about the world and about society and about the human experience that we can experience together. You just don't want to actually have that, because inherently life is not fair, and you want to take that out on the people who worked hard to make sure that they had a better situation, and you didn't work hard enough to get a good situation. You didn't work hard enough to be happy yourself because you are undisciplined, and the people who are like, hey, I'm disciplined and I actually made it a really good way, do you want to come and follow in my footsteps? You say, no, I don't want to put in effort. That's all this is. That's literally all this is. Like, no, I'm glad that we live in today. I don't wish it was 1954, because I don't know what it was like in 1954. I wasn't there. Like, why would I wish for something that I wasn't born into? I have no frame of reference for it. And actually, if I went back to 1954, I think things would still be a little bit difficult. I think things would still be a little hard. I think there'd still be challenges for everybody involved, because life is hard. It just becomes easier once you accept that it's hard. So, I don't know why they could can't accept that, and are ignorant to what it was actually like for people then. That apparently that's what conservatism is we just don't even know what it was like, and that's the funny thing is I'm saying this, like, yeah, I don't want to be there because I don't know what it was literally like. I just have a perception of it based off of like however many things I've heard about it. So it's like, yeah, I know I'm ignorant to what it was actually like. That's why I don't wish it to be that year. And I'm not with people who wish that they were in that year. I'm not with people who said they're born in the wrong generation. I was born in the right generation. I was born in it's not wrong or right. It just is. I was born in the generation that I am, and I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to be here because I love life, and regardless of how difficult it is, I love it in spite of its flaws. But everybody wants to love the things that they love about life and to get rid of the flaws without actually putting in the requisite effort to remove the difficulties of life. They think that they can just will it into existence, and that is actually ignorant. And not this perception of ignorance that you have. Oh, they just wish it was 1954. No, they don't. No, they don't. You haven't talked with any of them. Maybe you'd know this if you actually spoke with any of them, but you don't, because you don't want to speak with them, because you actually can't defend your position. You can't actually have these conversations with people, because you will fold. You will fold immediately, and you will retreat into this emotional bubble where we have a safe space, and we care so much about your feelings, and this is your truth, and this is your, like, quit the crap, please. When it comes specifically to conventions, free-for-all is a great point of study. It drew extremists and predators who were rightfully kicked out of our conventions. Its second, you failed to even attract artists to decorate the event. They resorted to using AI. Those who attended were simply masking their bigotry, trying to play off the fact that this whole event was political, and attempt at a big party of puny bigots who couldn't stand being the minority voice at our conventions anymore, all while pretending it was about furry. Our fandom wasn't built for them, yet they selfishly think it's owed to them. This is rich. So I don't really know much about free for all. I've heard about it, and I don't know, like, I don't know much about it. I think I heard about, like, I don't know, just sound effects, and some people went to that, and they had like the Confederate dude, the Confederate suitor, that guy, and I don't know. I don't really know like bloody anything about it. But I sure as hell am not going to trust somebody who thinks that conservatism is wishing the year was 1954 and that we were born in that generation, to tell me that I'm not going to trust you about bloody anything. Like I'm seriously not going to trust you about anything, especially with all of this idiocy that you're presenting here. Like you kind of don't have any credibility with me. But yeah, it's incredibly rich to say they selfishly think it's owed to them. No, we bloody don't. The only thing that is owed to us is that our rights are respected. But generally, if we are going to go someplace, and we feel like we are part of a community or a demographic or whatever the hell it is, if we want to actually come into that situation, we generally think, well, I actually want to participate in this, and I actually would rather if things were kind of ran this way. I do think that it is a good idea for there to be a contingency of sort of a conservative run group or whatever it is, something that is just ran with conservative ideals, not necessarily political, but just conservative ideals. But it's not conservative to, like, I don't know, be predatory. Like, I don't know, like, it's just, you know, you do have to vet the amount of people that you're taking in. So I don't know what a good example of it would be, but it's just ironic to say it's like, oh, it's owed to them. It's like, no, it's not. No, it really isn't. It's just, I'm just saying that there's a gap in the market here that actually maybe a lot of people will be happy if you were to just have a free speech platform for a free speech, free, you know, liberty, rights respecting platform for this that is actually realistic, and can cater to all of these people. That's just, it's kind of rich because it's like, it's owed to them. It's like, no, you think my respect is owed to you. You think that my approval of your behavior is owed to you. You think that that your personal, you need to be validated. And if I don't do that, then it's on me because I owe it to you. I don't. Who's the person who has the entitlement complex here? Somebody who just is like, hey, I actually have rights and I'd rather have those respected, and we should put in rules that actually protect people and protect people's rights and protect from negative consequences that are avoidable. That's an entitlement complex, but it's not an entitlement complex that we should have restrooms that inherently can respect people for choosing to go into the restroom of their choice because they don't believe in the objective reality that we are a sexually dimorphic species. Like, and I have to call you what you want me to call you. Like, it's like, I don't have to call you Your Majesty if that's what you want your pronouns to be. I don't have to call you Your Majesty because that's kind of a tyranny. You're kind of worshipping yourself, and just because you worship yourself doesn't mean that I have to as well. You are the one with the entitlement complex, not me. It's just so ridiculous. It's so rich. My message, you want to make art of anthros and be an annoying conservative? It's just a funny thing. Is how annoying is conservatism really? Like, it's only annoying to you because you disagree with it. But there's actually not that much that I would say about conservatism inherently that is obnoxious. Like I certainly think that there's a lot of behavior that can certainly be unbecoming, certainly, and that isn't a good spokesperson. I could just call this like Trump behavior, right? Like, but it's just you want to be an annoying conservative. It's like, okay, we'll just play that game. You're being an annoying leftist. Like, you want to be an annoying leftist? Like, have fun not having capitalism, have fun not having any success, have fun. Like, I don't know, it's reap what you sow, I guess. Make your own events, call it anthro. I don't care, but you can't have our fandom. This is the funny thing, is that that's ironic. Is like, it's owed to them, but then you also say it's our fandom. So which is it then? Is it owed to you, or is it owed to us? Or is it actually just kind of not even owned by anybody in general, and it's not owed to anybody by general, and then people can just associate with whomever they prefer to associate with and disassociate with those who they prefer not to? Like, what is the deal here? Like, why is there a cognitive dissonance there? It's like, call it anthro. I don't care, but you can't have a fandom. So it's like, I mean, that's what this literally is. It's just gatekeeping over ideological differences. Like, we don't have enough commonality between the two of us that we, like, you genuinely don't think that this is compatible. And so, again, with the meme that I showed, it's like, there's not enough room for you here, so we're gonna kick you out. And we're like, okay, we're gonna go create our own stuff. And then the stuff that we create is great because conservatism creates great stuff. Everything that you have that is great has basically been created by conservatism. There's not really been any major successful ideas or products or anything that hasn't been created through free markets and I don't know, just intelligent ideas. That it's just like, we're gonna kick you out. We're going to go and create great things, and then you're going to come in and invade those great things and say, no, we deserve this. It's owed to us. And then you're going to blame us for thinking that it's owed to, for supposedly, allegedly thinking that it's owed to us. and then we're gonna have to go and create our own place again, and then you're gonna come and invade it again. It really fits into the cycle, doesn't it? Don't blindly enforce the past, but do learn from it and remember it. Yeah, that's kind of conservatism. Like, these people don't even conserve the better parts of it. This is literally what conservatism is. Like, if people think that that's what conservatism is just blindly enforcing the past, then they don't know what conservatism is. These people haven't even learned anything about history. They haven't even learned about the past. They don't understand any of this stuff. Like, it's like, you got to learn from it, remember it, and you got to conserve the better parts of it. We'll do the trial and error, and we'll take the stuff that works, and we'll keep that working, keep that moving along, and we'll take the stuff that doesn't work, and we'll get rid of that. It's like, it's just ironic. They contribute batshit insane drama in this fandom that eventually someone will make a video about for me to listen while drawing, I suppose. But I mean, everybody contributes drama. Like, I don't know. Drama is just an inherent aspect of people with countervailing interests interacting with each other. Like, that's not inherent. It's not inherent that conservatives generate drama. Conservatives only generate drama in the context of, countervailing interests, i.e. leftism. Like, you get a conservative and a leftist in a group, and there's conservatives and there's leftists, and you intermingle them, you're going to get some drama coming out like pretty quickly. Just countervailing interests in general. The fact that there are individuals and other individuals, sometimes their interests are going to be mutually exclusive, and there's going to be some combative interaction there. Like, drama is resultant of just people being different, and you just don't like people who are different than you. You are participating in the drama by speaking this way. Like, it's just so ignorant. For starters, you could actually talk to conservative furries instead of painting a picture of what their ideologies and beliefs firsthand. Instead of going off on your established ideas about them, you'd be surprised about how much people can land in a gray area. Not everything is black and white, and I'm tired of seeing people on both on the left and the right being portrayed as nothing less of what the other actually already thinks. It's absolutely true. I've talked to them and many others. They always say this. They always say this crap. It's like, I've talked to them and it didn't work. Oh, really? Or maybe could it stand to reason that you are susceptible to confirmation bias and you've just rejected information that doesn't fit into your box that you've drawn and said conservatives sit in this box, and if they don't fit in that box, then they're not conservative. It's like, why do you get to define which box I go into? Like, just to save your own mental situation. It's like, we're all susceptible to this. We are all susceptible to this way of thinking. So why can't you just acknowledge it? I talk to them. Not sure why you're assuming people don't really talk to each other. Talking to them makes me sure I don't want conservatism in the fandom. This is exactly why I don't think it's like, not sure why you assume people don't really talk to each other. Because you don't understand what conservatism is, and you made it evidently and abundantly clear in the way that you speak about them. They're like, oh, conservatives just believe like this cartoonish thing. It's like, no, you actually, you've talked with them. You haven't listened to them. You haven't bloody listened to them because you don't understand what they believe. And for all of my faults, I'm opinionated about this topic. On all of these topics, but I think I understand pretty well. I think I understand pretty well why people feel the way that they feel about these things. Why people that I disagree with, because I have talked with them and I have heard them and I have understood them. You don't have to agree, but you can actually listen instead of like cartoonishly dumbing things down and then saying, well, no, I genuinely want to know the answer to the question. Like, you're ridiculous. Maybe it's because of how fascist the furry fandom is when it comes to conservatives, let alone us centrists. Lamau, what the hell are you talking about? This is just as insane as OP here. I think there could be a good balance between both conservative and progressive ideas. Conservatives have benefited the fandom in pushing for a greater acceptance of furries into the mainstream, and by encouraging change for the fandom to become more socially acceptable. I can imagine what the counter arguments to this would be, because if you're probably aware of their there are some very not socially acceptable places for the fandom that should be eliminated. I don't know what you're talking about. The term eliminated in this context. I think it's worth elaborating on very not socially acceptable aspects of the fandom, as that line of thinking could include things that are largely mundane or a problem for both groups of puritanical beliefs. I don't know what this is. It is an interesting topic, and I'm glad you like the video. It's the same question as Sky. What specific aspects are not socially acceptable ones? Sexual perversion? Like, I don't know. It's just pretty simple. I made a video about PUPHOODS a while back because it's not acceptable socially, so too were bathing suits. They were called bathing suits back then, like, but it's changed. Like, I don't know, stuff has changed a lot. Like, you know, bathing suits in general have changed as well. Like, they used to be far more modest, and now that it's far more difficult to find something that is actually, like, considered as modest. Like, though they were socially acceptable, at what point were they not socially acceptable? And, like, I don't know, things change, society changes, culture changes, but, like, I don't know what bringing this, like, that example doesn't actually help your point. This is the facetious attitude of progressivism, or I suppose it is just a conceit where it's like they weren't socially acceptable until they were, and that's just because there's a progress it's just like, no, you're misidentifying why things change. Like, you're identifying, like, it's like this science fiction idea of, like, evolution has this one direction that it goes, and if I can, like, tune into the moon or something, then I can actually project where it's going to go, because it's like science. It's like, what? Like, no, it's just, you know, natural consequences to behaviors, you know, when an entire society exists on a sort of an equilibrium. Like, so does appealing to the majority, like conservative ideology, wants help? Appealing to conservative ideology, what you're asking is, does appealing to conservative ideology help the furry fandom become more socially acceptable? Is that the question? Getting people to understand our norms as safe tends to work out better in the long run. Well, unless they're not safe. Like, there are some norms, I think, quote-unquote norms, that are absolutely not safe, like you know, leaving diapers in public areas, and there's a lot of stuff that's happened in cons, if we're going to that place in particular. Yeah, conservative has policies that are very actively anti-LGBT and anti-furry. Same thing. No, furry and LGBT are two different things. There's just an overlap. I haven't really got the time to deal with all of this rubbish. It's just like, ugh. If people are gonna be stupid, like I think I've made a pretty good case in the long run about a lot of the concepts that I've outlined here, but, like, goodness sake, I gotta run. Like, eventually you gotta cut it off. So I'll probably finish that up at some point or another. That's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I suppose the final point would be that it is not conservative, because that's what I was actually going to say before, is that it's like, well, you know, the idea that is sort of countervailing to that is that, like, you've got people like Tucker Carlson wasting their time on you know, on the news being like, these furries, and, you know, clearly they don't understand it, and they think that, you know, inherently being a furry is, like, inherently sexual. It's like, okay, there's absolutely sexualized aspects of it, but being a furry is no more inherently sexual than being a human is inherently sexual. There's plenty of things that we do that is not of a sexual nature, and so we can actually compartmentalize those things, and we should be able to do that. But it's like, I inherently, I would say that you aren't living up to conservative ideology very well at all if you believe that that you can't be furry and conservative, or that we should, like, legislate furries out of existence, when being furry does not inherently create any sort of a what's the word, words, please, words, my brain. And inherently creating some sort of a, goodness sake, externality. Like, being a furry does not inherently create any sort of externalities. Like, it's pretty straightforward. So it's like, because there's no externalities, we don't have to legislate it. Like, that's kind of the sort of libertarian idea on it. It's just like, yeah, people have the freedom to be able to do it because it's, no one's rights are overrunning anybody else's rights, so there's nothing wrong with it. So, like, it's not mutually exclusive. Like, and every single time, this is what they say, it's so condescending. Every single time someone on the left is just going to be like, but you're part of this special interest group, and that means that you can't be conservative because you're voting for something that's counter to your interests. Or it's just that I have a completely different ideology, and or not necessarily ideology, but that I have a different risk assessment of that situation. I've come to a different conclusion than you, and it's just so far off from your conclusion that you can't see that it's how someone came to that conclusion. It's like, you don't have to like go out of your way to agree with it, but you could try to understand, like, yeah, you could probably use a little bit of that perspective. Maybe you'll learn from it. Maybe you'll learn something new that you hadn't learned before. I've learned plenty of things from leftists, Marxists, plenty of people who I disagree with. I don't agree with them, but I learned stuff from them. I learned their perspective, and the very least I was able to exchange in ideas and to grow and to get experience and to learn more. And it's like, yeah, that's a good thing. Both people can profit from that situation without even having to change their ideology. You just don't want to change because it's too challenging to you. Nuance is too challenging to you. It's human nature. We want to simplify things. We don't want to be nuanced, but we wouldn't be here if people just went along with human nature. We would still just be animals. And I don't know, to animals, humans shall return, but I don't know. I definitely need to get out of here because it's easy to get wired for me. But goodness sake, one thing I can certainly say is that I am glad that Twitter is a free speech platform, because I think a lot of it is crap. A lot of the changes weren't good that Elon put through, but inherently now you can actually just say what you want without fearing getting like mass reported or brigaded out of existence, in the very least. It's like, people could still like team up on you and whatnot. You still get sent to the boo box, so it's just a shit in that sense. But now conservatives get to speak. Now right-wingers get to speak. And that's the only thing that the left doesn't like about it, is because they don't like it when we speak, because when we speak, we convince people. And they don't believe in their ability to convince people because they know inherently at their hearts that they don't have a good pitch that they can make. And so they get mad when we make our pitch because they know it'll be successful. Is that, holistic? Is that taking in other people's perspectives? Is that kind of cartoonishly... Is that not nuanced enough? I think there's not a lot of nuance in that view, for sure. But have I seen any evidence to the contrary? No. Have I been presented any of it today? No. And I was listening and hearing people out with whom I disagree. Didn't hear anything that convinced me today. Doesn't mean that I'm also not susceptible to confirmation bias. That absolutely makes sense. Like, we're all susceptible to it, but it's just kind of funny. Anyhow, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. It's so hot. I hate the summer.